Rob's eyes burst open as he awoke in his bed. He sat up and tried to process what he had just seen. For months, he had chalked up his visions as just dreams. His discussion with John and later with several wildlings had enlightened him on what they really were. They were events through the eyes of Grey Wind. A month ago, if someone told him they could control animals with their mind, he would have laughed. He remembered laughing at Bran when he had asked him if he believed old Nan's story about skin changes. His latest adventure to the wall had been eye-opening to say the least. He could no longer deny what was right in front of him. He was a warg. As he sat in bed, his memory of what he had witnessed began to clear. It was Shaggydoak who had stolen his, or more accurately Grey Wind's, kill. But what in the name of the Seven is Shaggydoak doing here? He thought. He quickly realized that it didn't matter in the slightest why. If there was any chance that Rookon was with him, he was going to investigate. He quickly dressed himself and woke up enough men for a scouting party. He sent them out from the camp and told him to look for any sign of Rookon's direwolf. They returned several hours later escorting a party of nearly 200 Umber men. He greeted their leader, Mors Umber, as the men descended from their horses and entered the camp. Mors Umber was far different than his nephew, the Great Yon. He had a cold demeanor in comparison to the Great Yon's joyous one. His face was that of a hard man that had known battle. He wore an eye patch over a missing eye and the skin of a snow bear over his head. Instead of the booming greeting Rob had been used to with the Great Yon, Mors Umber merely greeted him with a simple "Your Grace." His single eye expressed no semblance of joy at meeting his king. "Welcome, my lord. I had not expected reinforcements from Last Hearth, but I welcome them. My apologies, Your Grace, but these forces aren't here as reinforcements, they are merely an escort. Surely these lands aren't dangerous enough to warrant such a large escort," Rob said in surprise. "We've nearly expelled all." Rob was unable to finish his sentence as he saw a boy being escorted to the front of the company. It had been nearly 2 years since he had last laid eyes on his youngest brother, and while he had grown nearly a foot and his hair had become unkempt, it was unmistakable. Rob quickly dropped all formalities and rushed over to embrace his brother. "Thank the gods you're alive," Rob said as he held his brother tightly. After several seconds, he realized that his brother did not return the hug, nor did he say anything in response. He released his brother to look him in the eyes and was met with a blank expression, as if his brother was looking at a stranger. "Rookon. It's me. Your brother, Rob. I don't think you're going to get much of a reply, Lord." Rob turned to see the woman he had nearly killed 2 years earlier. "What's wrong with him?" "Can't say, Lord. He started talking less and less after we separated from your brother. Now the little lord just talks to his direwolf now," she said before placing a motherly hand on top of Rookon. "And you just let him go off by himself? A boy who couldn't even walk?" Rob yelled as he pulled Rookon away from her. "Wasn't my place to be questioning the orders of princes," Osha replied defensively. "Your Grace, there are other things that we need to discuss," Mors Umber interrupted. "Of course, my lord. Please follow me," Rob said as he escorted Mors Umber into the castle. Rob spoke to Mors Umber in his chambers with only Rookon and Osha in attendance. "Go on. Tell his grace what happened during the sack," Mors said to Osha. "Yes, I'm curious to know how you all were able to escape the sack of Winterfell. It seems the Ironborn wanted us to think they had killed Bran and Rookon. Sir Roderick said they found 2 burned bodies, one of the boys' legs had been broken. We assumed it had to be Bran's." Osha looked at Rob nervously as she waited for her chance to speak. "Pardon, Lord, but it's your grace," Mors corrected. "That's quite all right, my lord. Please continue," Rob said. "It wasn't the Ironborn that sacked the castle. So Asha was speaking the truth," Rob mused. "They carried the banner of the flayed man." "What?" Rob yelled. Osha was taken aback by his outburst. Rob realized this and calmed himself. "Sorry. Please continue. How were you able to escape with Bran and Rookon?" "We didn't all escape together. Some young lordling and his sister came the week before and started telling your brother that he had to go north of the wall. Said he had to meet the 3-eyed raven. Me and your maester tried to tell him it was nonsense but he wouldn't listen. One night we awoke and he and Hodder and those two lordlings were gone. Looking back at it, it was probably the smartest thing for him. Had he been in the castle he probably would have been killed. How did you and Rukan survive then? And how did they even get in the castle for that matter? Rob asked, not realizing he was asking too much at once. I think they just let them in. You took most of the men with you when you marched south and your maester had been sending out what was left of the guards to try and find your brother. They must have hoped they were there to help. The folly of leaving Winterfell so unprotected began to sink in. So how did you and Rukan escape? Your brother began spending most of the day in the crypts at Winterfell after your father died. We gave up trying to get him out of there most days. I was bringing him some bread when I saw the men killing all the folks in the castle. I ran to the crypts and hid in there with your brother. We stayed in there for a whole day until we felt it was safe to leave. We left Winterfell and caught up to your brother a few weeks later. Your brother's direwolf was able to track Summer. I pleaded with your brother not to go north. Osha said with sadness in her voice. But he wouldn't listen. Those other lordlings with him convinced him of some grand plan the three-eyed raven had for him. He ordered me to take your brother to Last Hearth. I would have sent word to you sooner, your grace, but with what happened with the Bolton men I thought it best to let you hear the story in person. Moore said as soon as Osha had finished her story. No, you were right to do so. With what's going on I would rather not have this information getting out before I can make plans accordingly. Do you know who leads the Bolton men now? I was told that Roost's bastard had kidnapped Lady Hornwood and forcibly married her, but Sir Roderick said he killed him. I do not, your grace. But there is chaos in his lands. Bolton men have been pushed out of the Hornwood lands, but fighting is still going on between Bolton and Marndale men. We had a villager seeking shelter from the Bolton men claiming to see Karstark men fighting alongside them. Rob clenched his fist in anger. Bolton and now Karstark men. On the morrow we will discuss this with the rest of the lords. I want you to tell them nothing of what you know about the sack. Say only that you gave my brother shelter after he fled Winterfell. As you say, your grace. Moore said before bowing and leaving. Rob then turned his attention to Osha. I owe you an apology for yelling at you earlier. You've done more for my family than could have been expected. You have brought my brother to me, and for that you have my gratitude. The free folk have agreed to accept my laws in exchange for protection. They are setting up along the new gift as we speak. If you wish you may return to them. No, don't leave. Rukan cried as he grabbed Osha's hand. I have no love for the rest of the free folk. The only one that meant much to me died years ago. If you will allow me I would like to stay with the little lord. Osha replied. If that is your wish. Rob replied. Rob had dismissed Osha after that and tried to talk to his brother alone. His brother didn't say anything back, but Rob kept talking to him anyway. Finally he decided to find a room for Rukan and put him to bed. He tucked him in himself and said one final thing. I'm sorry for what happened. I know you must feel like your family abandoned you. First father left, then mother, then me. I know it must have been hard on your own, but that's over now. You're coming home. Mother and Arya are at Winterfell and I know they'll be thrilled to see you. You're going to be with your family. Rob watched as Rukan drifted off to sleep. He stayed on his brother's bed, watching him until he finally remembered his other responsibilities. He went to his chambers and set up a map on the table. He began looking over it and setting up pieces in his head. No matter what it takes, I will protect you, all of you. Karstark, Bolton, Tyrell, Lannister. I will burn each and every one of those houses to the ground if that's what it takes. He promised to himself. Chapter 20, The King is Dead, Long Live the King. Tower of the Hand. Kevan picked up the half-burned parchment and examined it. From the half that he could read he was able to tell that the letter was of little significance. From which lord it originated from was unclear, but he was sending his regrets that he would be unable to attend Joffrey's wedding. He was rather lucky he missed the wedding, Kevan thought. The capital had been locked down immediately after Joffrey had died. Tywin had barred any ship from leaving port and closed the city gates. It had only been a day, but Kevan had little hope that Sansa Stark would be found. It was clear that someone had used the chaos to smuggle her out of the capital. Kevan picked up a small chest that had splintered and broken open in multiple places during the fire. Instead of searching for the key, he merely smashed the broken wood against a pillar. The brackets of the chest held the small chest together, but the wood came off easily. He saw a few ashes at the bottom that convinced him that nothing would be recovered from the chest. Nothing in this one either. I fear that most of your documents are going to be the same. All your notes, the messages, and the account ledgers I brought up here yesterday all went up in flames, it would seem. I think you're right. Tywine replied as he inspected the burnt remains of his cabinet. But whether the documents have been destroyed or stolen are of another matter. You don't think this fire was like all the others, merely a distraction? No, I think the Tower of the Hand was a second objective for them. They poison Joffrey, then in the chaos they steal Sansa Stark from under our noses. They light a score of fires around the capital to cover her exit, and while we're running around trying to put them out, no one thinks to guard the Tower of the Hand. If it is as you say, that someone did this to kill Joffrey, rescue Sansa, and steal the contents of this tower, that poses another question. And what's that? Tywine asked as he picked up another burnt piece of parchment. Who did this? Robb Stark had more cause than anyone to want Joffrey dead and to get his sister back, but poison doesn't seem like his style. Agreed. Tywine replied, as he thought of how ironic it would be had it been Robb Stark. I planned to have him killed at a wedding, and it was my own grandson who ended up being assassinated. Though Oberyn Martell is well known for using poison. The Martells had motive to do us harm. If Oberyn was going to poison anyone, it was going to be me. It's not like him to kill a child. If you say. I've heard reports from Littlefinger, saying that rumors have spread around the Vale, that we had a hand in Lysa Arryn's assassination. Rumors started by the Volantin, no doubt. Regardless, Lord Royce is using it as a war cry. He has nearly a third of the lords in the Vale ready to join the war on the Stark side. Baelish has convinced the rest to stay neutral, but without Lysa Arryn there is nothing to keep them from going off on their own. Nestor Royce has refused to hand over Robin Arryn until the lords come to a consensus on who should be his regent. Those damn cheese lords. It seems that the Volantin have brought more trouble for us than mere slave soldiers. They've been helping the North find allies. The last thing I needed was someone in the Stark camp who knows how to do something other than win battles. Write to Littlefinger. Tell him he has whatever is required to keep the Vale Lords from joining the Stark cause. Already done. Good. Do you have any idea on who it was that killed Lady Arryn? Kevan asked. Any one of the Vale Lords could have been responsible. She was a woman who lost her wits a decade ago. I'm sure there were plenty of people in the Vale who wished to see her gone. Unstable rulers tend to cause instability after all. I suppose it doesn't really matter now. With the lords fighting over control of Lord Arryn, there will be little chance of them coming to either our side or the Stark side. So we're back where we started. Fighting a war that could last till winter. Even with his Volantin support, Stark can't last forever. He'll have a much harder time keeping his people fed than we will. He marched all the peasants down south before the final harvest, and we burned most of the riverlands to the ground. His kingdoms will feel the effects of this winter well before us. As you say. Kevan responded half-heartedly. Have the men learned anything about who started the fires? There are a number of suspects with varying degrees of validity. Lady Stokeworth swears she saw Lord Rossby set the tablecloth on fire. Lady Stokeworth has reason to blame Lord Rossby. She is in line to Rossby Castle. Tywine finished. Yes. I wouldn't give what she says much credit. Lady Riker claims she saw one of the gold cloaks starting the fire, though she did not see his face. Several of the gold cloaks claimed they saw the dwarfs starting the fire. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find any of them since the wedding. Who hired them? Unsure. Maester Pycelle said that it was Joffrey's idea to have the dwarfs at the wedding, but as for who he ordered to hire them is a mystery. It's doubtful anyone will own up to it after what happened. Tywine grit his teeth in anger. That boy was given far too much range. I should have taken him as my ward long before he came of age to rule. Cersei ruined him. I will not let the same thing happen to Tommen. I suppose if any good has come from this, it will be the fact that Tommen has the potential to be a much better king than Joffrey was. If he is taught well. After this war is over, I'll make sure he knows what it means to rule. There will be no skipping council meeting to torture whores. And this time the king will know his place. Out of neglect I allowed Joffrey to get an inflated ego of himself. That was a mistake we will not make with Tommen. Have you spoken to Mace Tyrell about Margaery's marriage to Tommen? I know that a certain amount of time is expected for mourning, but we are running of time. The Blackfish has expelled all our forces from the Riverlands and is consolidating his forces together. The Greyjoys have invaded the Shield Islands, and Roose Bolton is burning his way down the Mander. If Robb Stark brings reinforcements down the neck, he could lay waste to the Westerlands or to the Reach. Kevan said, unable to hide his worry from his brother. Tommen's marriage will take place in a moon's turn. I have little doubt that Mace Tyrell will have any problems with that. And how does Cersei feel about this? After she has had the appropriate amount of time to grieve for Joffrey, she will be married to Loras and sent off to Highgarden. Speaking of Cersei, her accusation against Tyrion seem absurd now. The ravings of a grieving mother. With the disappearance of Sansa and the fires that were started to cover her escape, it's clear that there was another party involved. We should have these charges against Tyrion dismissed. It's clear he was not responsible. We have no proof of that. He could have easily been working with whoever was responsible for stealing Sansa Stark. Kevan gave his brother a queer look. You can't possibly believe that after what happened. Cersei has leveled these charges against Tyrion with no other evidence but that he was at the wedding. Surely you must see that she is delusional. We will have a trial to determine what role he played in everything. Tywin replied, annoyed. Have you thought of the consequences for our house if he is convicted? We've had to lock Jaime in his chambers for trying to send Sansa back north. Cersei is mad with grief. Lancel has forsaken his house. William and Martin were killed by Rickard Karstark. There will be no one competent to lead our house if we should die. I would let maggots devour me before I made that fool the head of our house. He has only himself to blame for the situation he finds himself in. Now I will hear no more of this. Tywin replied angrily. I've given Mace Tyrell leave to send Loras with 10,000 men to deal with the Northmen and the Ironborn. He should be finished in time to link back up with our host when we march into the Riverlands and finish this once and for all. You can't mean to suggest that you're planning on leaving the capital. You know as well as I that Mace Tyrell will demand to lead the army if I do not go. That fool can't be trusted to deal with Robb Stark. I abandoned my fight with the young wolf to deal with Stannis. Now that the true threat to the crown is gone, I will finish off this northern rebellion myself. You will act as hand in my stead. If you think that's best. Kevan said as he picked up a small portrait that had been burned in all but the top left corner. All that one could see now was a few strands of gold hair. Kevan knew it was a portrait of Joanna. He would have sooner had the entire Red Keep burn than this. Have we received a response from Lord Florent yet? Tywin asked in an annoyed tone, as he found what was left of his personal seal, underneath all the ashes. He still maintains that he no longer has the Princess Shireen in his custody. He has agreed to give up the castle and pledge his remaining 2,000 men to Tommen in exchange for his lands and titles restored. He's lying. He's trying to get his lands back without handing over Shireen. His 2,000 men mean little if Stannis' daughter remains out there. Lords could flock to her side as soon as Tommen passes a law that displeases them. You know as well as I that taxes are going to have to be raised after this war is won. Surly Robb Stark is a more pressing concern than a young girl with grayscale. Stannis never could find a decent match for her. They'll have an even harder time now that her father is gone. I fear that if we do not bring him into the fold, he might seek out Robb Stark as an ally. We can't risk Robb Stark having a base of operations that close to the capital. Kevan said hesitantly. Though they were his words, it was the same argument Tyrion had made a fortnight ago, and Tywin had a bad habit of dismissing anything his son said, regardless of its merits. Tywin moved his seal around in his hand as he contemplated what his brother had said. Do you believe he is telling the truth? I think Lord Florent would give up his own mother if it got him his lands back. He proposed marrying Shireen to Tommen when he first sent his terms of surrender. I'm sure someone among Stannis' army knew the kind of person Joffrey was and wanted to keep her away from the capital. Tommen even told me that he remembered Joffrey treating their cousin cruelly when Stannis was master of ships. It's not hard to believe one loyal man could spirit her away to Essos, right under Lord Florent's nose. Fine. He can have Brightwater keep back, but everything not within 10 miles of his keep will be forfeit to the crown. We have to do something to start offsetting the crown's debt. A fair compromise, Kevan said as he handed his brother what was left of the small portrait. I'm sorry. Tywin's expression went from frustration to sadness. He sighed. This was my favorite portrait of her. We had it made right before I went off to serve as hand. I've made many mistakes, but the greatest was not spending enough time with her. She was an amazing woman. A small smile formed on Tywin's face. She was. Tywin stared at the burned portrait. When this war is finally won, I will need you by my side to dig our family out of the mess my children made. I recommend you bring your wife up here as soon as possible. This job is too stressful to not have your loved ones with you. You've done it quite well without Joanna by your side. Out of necessity. We do what is demanded of us when the time comes, though when I had Joanna it was so much easier. Tywin replied before dropping the portrait on top of the pile of ashes. There's nothing that can be salvaged. Throw it all out. He told the steward as he and Kevan walked down the Tower of the Hand. If I am to aid you here, who is going to manage the Westerlands in your absence? Jaime will take up the role he was born to. He seemed quite content to stay in the Kingsguard last I spoke to him. After what has happened, I think he'll rise to the occasion. Especially if he wants his brother spared. Besides, even he has to accept his days of being an exceptional knight are over. Gardens of the Red Keep, 2nd day of the new year 300 AC. So am I the queen or not? Margaery asked her grandmother. More than you were with Renly, but less so than if Joffrey would have done you the favor of consummating your marriage before dying. Either way, this would not be the most opportune time to bring it up. Both my husbands have died before our marriage was consummated. I must be cursed. Margaery said sadly. Nonsense, your situation has improved remarkably. Your marriage to Joffrey was something that had to be done out of formality, but now that he is gone you will have a much more malleable husband to contend with. And it couldn't have come at a better time. Our alliance with the Lannisters is now more important than ever. Robb Stark has nearly finished cleansing his lands of those accursed Ironborn. Once he's done with that, he'll be marching down the neck with fresh levies. Lord Tywin will have to lead the army himself, lest he let your father have all the glory for defeating the young wolf. He'll be gone and Cersei will be too busy trying to have her brother executed to stop Tommen from falling into your hands. Use this time wisely. Once Cersei finishes with her mama's farce of a trial, she'll move her attention back to you. That woman truly is blinded by her hatred. Who would wish so much to have their own brother executed? You don't think, in this case, she has some justification? Her brother murdered her son. His own nephew. The Queen of Thorns frowned at her granddaughter. My dear, you're far too clever to believe Cersei's mad ramblings. He may have hated his nephew, but he isn't the type to kill his own blood, and even if he were the sort, he's smart enough not to be seen as the last person that touched the cup that held his poison. But if he didn't do? Margaery's eyes widened as it dawned on her what her grandmother was telling her. But why? I was going to be queen. She asked in confusion. A queen to a mad king? You think I'd let you marry that beast? Having to worry every day that he might have you beaten for dressing your hair the wrong way? No, Tommen will be a much safer match for you. He's a sweet boy that will do whatever his counselors tell him, and if you take advantage of this he'll value you among all of them. But you have no guarantee that they'll accept another marriage. Robb Stark is the only guarantee I needed. As long as he still breathes, the Lannisters' position is in jeopardy. They need us as much as we need them. Olenna put her hand on her granddaughter's cheek. This is not something you need concern yourself with. All you need to be focused on is making Tommen yours. Though none of that bothered her as much as the news from home. A Stark army sacking Duskendale was one thing. It was incredibly close to the capital, but they couldn't hope to challenge them while the Tyrell army was here. What was concerning was Lord Bolton blundering his way down the Mandaya at the same time the Greyjoys had decided to attack the Shield Islands. Talk about bad luck. Now she knew how the young wolf must have felt when the North was invaded right when he was pressing his advantage on the Lannisters. Loras had taken 10,000 men to deal with Lord Bolton and the Greyjoys. Far more than was necessary, but it was better to be safe than sorry. They needed to deal with this quickly. The Reclords had already shown that words were wind when they flocked to Stannis Banner before his brother's body was even cold. If Mace couldn't do his job in protecting their lands, they might try and find someone who could, like Lord Hightower or gods forbid Lord Florent. And there was the matter of the fires that had broken out during the wedding. It was not hard for her to guess who was behind them after one of them had gone off in the Tower of the Hand. The fact that Cersei still believed her brother was behind Joffrey's murder was a testament to her rage and stupidity. At least her uncle and father had used some of their sense when they came to the conclusion that some of the Vale Lords might be responsible. They were correct, if not a bit vague. It was a very specific Vale Lord who had been responsible, and it just happened to be the one they would least expect. It was obvious to her that Littlefinger had set off the fires in the city. Had the fires only been set off in random places in tone, she might have chalked it up to him making extra precautions to guarantee Sansa's escape. That after was what he got out of their little deal. What he wanted with that young girl was unclear, but she assumed it had something to do with his childhood obsession with the girl's mother and humiliating defeat by her uncle. I mean, did he really think he had any hope of marrying the first daughter of a Lord Paramount? But she was getting distracted. The fire in the Tower of the Hand was much more than a mere distraction, it was to cover something up. His position made just what he was covering up seem obvious. He had been stealing from the treasury. Just how much he was stealing she didn't know, but it must have been north of 100,000. It was quite common, even expected, for lords to use their position to benefit themselves financially, otherwise no one would take up such a thankless task as Master of Coin. But Littlefinger must have passed the amount deemed acceptable long ago. He could have hardly asked for a better king to do it under. An attentive king would no doubt wish to have people look over the accounts, if for no other reason than to make sure mistakes weren't made. A lazy king, like Robert Baratheon, would delegate all responsibility, regarding finances, to his Master of Coin. Even good and honest councillors would attribute all the crown's debts to the king's extravagant spending habits. Each grand tourney the king threw would be another chance for the Master of Coin to skim a little off the top. Pay a charge of 1,000 dragons for the creation of tourney grounds and record the charge as 1,200. Record the salary of 2,000 gold cloaks when there are only 1,990. Or if the rumors were true of the last Lord Commander, you could sell positions to the officers and make money from the top and the bottom. Littlefinger was probably relying on his marriage to the widowed Lysa Arryn to save him from any repercussions. He wasn't quite wrong. Had he secured the protectorship of the Vale, he would have become far too powerful to prosecute. But now, with the death of Lysa Arryn, if he returned to King's Landing with nothing to show for it, he would most certainly be hung for treason if his crimes ever were discovered. Then again, there was no guarantee his crimes would be uncovered. The Hand's son had looked through the accounts and hadn't found anything wrong. She knew that Kevan had taken on the responsibilities of Master of Coin after Tyrion's arrest. Tywin probably doesn't want anyone who wasn't a Lannister looking through the crown's finances. Regardless, she didn't think Kevan Lannister had found any evidence of Baelish's thieving. And she was quite relieved that he hadn't. If Littlefinger was to fall, he might very well try and take me down with him. The debt was important to her since her family would soon be invested in the crown, but she knew that there was no chance of recovering the money that Littlefinger had already embezzled. But she had faith that the man was smart enough to know when he had hit a limit. If he ever returned to the position, he and everyone else on the small council would have to know that cuts would need to be made. Even worst, taxes were going to need to be raised, after the war was over, of course. If they raised them while Robb Stark still lived, they would drive half the lords in Westeros to his cause. She was brought out of her thoughts when she finally reached her room. As she entered her room to rest, she began to realize just how tired she felt. I'm getting far too old for this. The scheming and politicking should be left to the next generation. Though I suppose that only applies to families that have competent children to pass the job on to. Really, What were the chances that both my son and grandson would turn out to be such great fools? Margary really will have to carry this family when I am gone. I just pray that whatever woman Laura's manages to plant a child in is smarter than he is, or there really will be no future for this family. She dismissed all the thoughts of her family and politics out of her mind as she placed her head on a pillow. A new happier thought came to her. She thought of returning to the Uber, once this war was over. She would spend the remainder of her years there, she thought as she drifted off to sleep. Chapter 21, Home. Rob, what do you mean it was the Boltons? Roose Bolton was with your army during the entire campaign. Caitlin asked. But his bastard was left in charge in his stead, causing all sorts of problems. He kidnapped Lady Hornwood and married her against her will. But we killed him, Your Grace. Roderick yelled out in surprise. Lord Marndale thought that as well. But Moore's Umber is not convinced. He says his men found girl on the edge of his lands with some troubling stories. Rob tried to push the horrible acts that had been reported out of his mind. She claims the bastard still commands the Dread Fort. And Osha said she saw the banners of the flayed man coming through the gates right before Winterfell was sacked. The Glovers captured Theon's sister when they retook Deepwood Motte. She claimed to have no knowledge of any Ironborn attack on Winterfell. I suppose she told you the same? Rob said to Theon. All the faces around the table turned to Theon. We spoke only a few words before the king smoot, though my uncle did say it was unclear who had sacked Winterfell. Scores of men were taking credit for it, but no one had any real proof. Even if it is the case that Lord Bolton's bastard sacked Winterfell, that does not mean he himself was complicit in these crimes. Bastards are naturally untrustworthy, and there are numerous examples of children going rogue when given authority. Rob saw Arya's face grimace at their mother's derogatory mention of bastards. He was glad that she had refrained from yelling at their mother. Whether he knew or not is irrelevant at this point. He is responsible for the actions of the people he delegated authority to, just as I would have been for Sir Roderick. He needs to be recalled from his position as soon as possible to answer for his son's crimes and to bring order to his lands. He will be given a trial, as is his right, but I have little faith in his innocence. Roose Bolton was not the kind of man to give authority to someone he did not trust or that he did not know what they would do. But still, all of this is speculation. We need to find some actual evidence before you try him for treason. Had Rob been in a better mood he might have brought up how ironic that was coming from her, but as it was he merely dismissed it. When the campaign starts back up it will be too dangerous to have a lord as powerful as him with his loyalty in question. I'm going to have him recalled from the Reach and we will find the truth of his innocence when I head back south. Caitlin wished to reply but said nothing when her son gave her a look suggesting that was to be the end of it. Rob calmed down when it was apparent his mother was not going to fight him any further. He knew why she was concerned. He was about to try another of his own lords for treason. And not just any lord but the lord of the second most powerful house in the north. Had houses Umber and Marndale been less stalwart in their loyalty his actions might have been worrisome to them. Look, none of this can leave this room. Roose Bolton will be removed from his position quietly and then made to answer for his crimes. Most of his men are divided among other lords in the Riverlands. If he gets word I know about what his son did it will be like the Karstarks all over again. Of course, Your Grace. Sir Roderick replied. The rest of the family merely nodded. Now that that's been taken care of. Where's John? Arya interrupted. John chose to stay at the wall. Rob replied. What do you mean he chose to stay at the wall? Caitlin asked. I mean that he refused to forsake his vows and leave the Night's Watch. Rob replied, mildly annoyed. Rob, why won't Rickon talk? Caitlin asked, her words dripped in fear. Rob pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. It had been a long march from the wall and through the mountains, to visit each and every clan chief. All he wanted to do was lay down next to Talisa. But of course, there was far too much to do. And now there was this. Did he tell his mother the truth? That would involve explaining to his mother that Rickon had powers that just a few months ago, he would have dismissed as myths. No, now was not the time for that conversation. Rickon's time on the road and his isolation have traumatized him. The only person who he talks to is Osha, and until he feels safe with us that's going to continue. Who is this Osha? And now I have to explain that a wildling has been watching over her youngest son for the last 2 years. He saw a stupid smirk on Theon's face and instantly wanted to hit his friend. She's a wildling woman, Theon, and I captured before we left Winterfell. And you just let her take care of your brother? She asked incredulously. I didn't let her do anything. She was working in the kitchens when I marched south. She took it upon herself to keep Rickon safe and bring him to the Umbers for me. She saved his life, and for that, we are in her debt. Robb snapped. Catelyn didn't look all that convinced as she put her arm around her youngest child. Sending her away would devastate Rickon. In the last 2 years, he was abandoned by most of his family. Osha has been the only constant thing in his life. He could tell the words cut deep into his mother. He knew she must have felt guilty about leaving Rickon alone. He felt guilty too, but he couldn't change the past. All he could do now was try and keep Rickon safe. He still had hope that in time Rickon would recover. He would have his mother and sister with him, and soon a little niece or nephew. As far as everything else is concerned, we can discuss it over supper. Now if you could give me the room, I have some things that need to be looked at. In truth, there were a great many things he needed to talk to them about. The wildlings, his warging, and the threat of the White Walkers. Somehow, he knew that if he started any of those conversations now, he would be stuck in this room debating it for the rest of the day. It can wait for later. He rationalized. Catelyn looked as if she wanted to stay. It had been over 2 months since he had seen her oldest son, yet it had been over 2 years since she had seen her youngest son. She put her hand around Rickon and turned to leave. Again, Sir Roderick was the only one to actually reply before bowing and following Lady Catelyn. Talisa gave Robb a kiss before leaving. Robb saw his sister following the rest of the group out the door but stopped her. Arya, wait. Arya was rather surprised when her brother stopped her. She turned to face him and noticed a thin smile on his face. Should I leave you two alone? Theon asked Robb. No, this will only take a second. He replied before turning to Arya. Since you're not in a dress, I take it you've been training with Daisy. I have. She replied proudly. I'm getting good too. I'll beat Devan any day now. Robb gave a light chuckle. And I hope you haven't been giving our mother too much trouble. I've been listening to her. She replied defensively. I sat with Talisa during all those stupid meetings and listened to everyone complain about their problems. Robb gave another chuckle. It would seem that you and Bran have more experience ruling Winterfell than I. Well, what about Shireen? Have you and the princess gotten along? Robb asked, bracing for the worst. Yeah. She said enthusiastically. She's been training with me and Devan. We've been doing a lot of stuff together. We used to play in the Godswood together too, but Mother made us stop when those giants settled in there. She said it was too dangerous to play with them. Arya said with a hint of annoyance. Robb was so relieved to hear that his sister had gotten along with Princess Shireen that he nearly missed the mention of them playing with giants. That will be a conversation for another time. Well, that's all I wanted to ask you. However, I need you to do something for me. Elmar is outside that door. He saw his sister's face turn into a frown at the mention of her betrothed. He is supposed to find a room for Sandor Clegane. Show him a room suitable to put Sandor Clegane in and help him and the knight transporting Clegane get him into the room. Can't a servant do that? She whined. Yes, but I asked you to do it. Now go. Robb replied. The smile on his face annoyed her more than if he had snapped at her. He was acting like he was doing her a favor. She stomped out of the room to find Elmar. So, I suppose we have a lot to discuss. It would seem the King's moot didn't go as planned. Robb asked sarcastically. You could say that. I thought Asher or my uncle Victorian would be my biggest problem. Turned out we just split the vote so that Euron could take the crown. Your sister said something about his plan. He wants to give the Dragon Queen his big cock and rule Westeros with her. And the Lords of the Iron Islands went for that. After being crushed by the mainland twice, the idea of bringing Dragonfire down upon the Lords of Westeros seemed attractive to many. It wasn't a total loss though. My uncle Roderick refused to accept Euron's rule. Houses Harlaw, Botley, and Blacktide have kept their forces together and refused to follow him into his invasion of the Reach. And your uncle didn't retaliate against them? Robb asked in surprise. House Harlaw is too powerful. He would have shattered his hold on the Iron Islands if he tried to remove my uncle Roderick from power. He's probably hoping his conquest in the Reach will bring the other houses back into his fold. He can't possibly hold the lands he has invaded. The Tyrells will send forces to reclaim what he has taken. Doesn't matter. The conquest itself is enough to add prestige to his claim. He paid the iron price for the land. Well, whatever his reasoning, I won't complain. He's done me a favor by diverting the Tyrells' attention. Let him get his men killed trying to take the Reach. That was my thinking as well. I suppose you'd probably like to see your sister? Robb asked Theon. Not particularly. But if you'll permit me, my mother would probably like to see her. I can have guards post. It's fine. Robb said dismissively. All right, hurry up and follow me. Arya said, annoyed as she passed Elmar. She found a room that was unused quickly enough, but because there had not been enough new servants, she and Elmar had to prepare the room themselves. Okay, so where is the Hound? I'm supposed to help you get him in this bed, she said with twice the normal amount of malice. She was angry at Robb for making her work with Elmar and madder still for having to help the Hound. I believe Sir Gendry was charged with escorting the Hound. A sliver of hope went through her mind at the mention of that name until the more rational side of her brain dismissed it. Gendry wasn't a knight. And besides, the Red Woman took him away. She followed Elmar into the courtyard and forced their way through the army of men that were moving around the courtyard. There they are, Elmar said as he pointed to a pair of men in front of a cart. Arya's heart skipped a beat. She knew who the person in front of her was, but at the same time, she knew it to be impossible. A voice in her head was telling her it was a trick. That she would walk up to him and it would turn out to be someone else. While her mind decided what was true or not, her feet didn't wait as she broke out into a run. She wrapped her arms around the man in front of her and buried her face into his stomach. It's good to see you too, lady. Gendry said. Gendry, she's a princess. Elmar corrected with a mix of fear and embarrassment. That's right, my mistake. It's good to see you too, princess, he said in a mocking tone. Shut up, she said as she smashed her fist into his chest, doing absolutely no damage to the man. She fought to hold back tears. What happened? How did you end up in Robb's army? Get me some more wine, you bastard, Sandor Clegane yelled before throwing the empty wineskin at Gendry. I'll tell you about it once we get the Hound to his room. His Grace wants the Maester to look at his back. Elmar, can you help me with the stretcher? Yeah, the boy said nervously as he climbed on the cart and helped pick the stretcher up. They placed it on the ground and another man picked up the end. Elmar led them into the castle and showed them where Clegane's chambers had been prepared. I don't think I've ever been called bastard more times than that, Gendry said as they exited Clegane's chamber. And I don't think he even knows you're a bastard, Elmar replied. Wouldn't surprise me in the least, Gendry replied with a smile. Well, I still need to take care of His Grace's horse. Princess, may I escort you back to your chambers? He said as he extended his hand. It's my own castle. I think I know how to get to my room. Arya shot back with an edge. Disappointment crossed Elmar's face. As you say, my princess. He then bowed and left the two alone. You should be nicer to him. He's a good guy, Gendry said as soon as Elmar was out of sight. He's annoying. Robb said I have to marry him. Elmar told me, except he seemed more excited about it than you. Gendry teased. He said he thought you were pretty. Arya hit Gendry in the stomach, but it didn't prevent the man from laughing. Why are you and him such good friends anyways? Being a bastard among nobles can be pretty bad sometimes, but I'd take it over being a free any day. Some of the guys in your brother's guard were giving Elmar a hard time, so I'd figured we'd get along pretty well. So what happened to you after the Red Woman took you? Arya finally asked. The two found a comfortable place to talk and Gendry spoke of his journey over the last 6 months. Arya wasn't sure what to say after Gendry had finished his story. It was a lot to process. So, you're King Robert's son. That's what she told me. Helps a lot of things make sense. How? Well, Davos said that my uncle. He felt odd as he tested the word out. That Stannis thought the Queen's children weren't his brother's children. He and Jon Arryn looked for all of King Robert's bastards. That's why Jon Arryn came to me and why your father did the same a few years later. Apparently, all of King Robert's children had black hair. So why did the Red Woman take you? Arya asked. It has something to do with my blood. She says there's power in King's blood. I think she wanted to do something with mine until Sir Davos convinced her otherwise. So why did you stay with them? She noticed the question seemed to confuse him, so she elaborated. I thought you didn't like nobles. So why did you stay with Davos? Why did you fight for my brother when you're not even a Northman? I've learned not all nobles are bad. You and Shireen were different than most nobles I've met before, and your brother seems like he'd be a good king. And Sir Davos is common born just like me. The answer, while true, didn't tell the whole story. Arya could feel him hiding something. Okay, but that doesn't explain why you stayed. I get that Davos and Shireen are good people, but you could have stayed with them and been a cupbearer or even a smith if they had found another castle. Why fight in a war for people you barely know? Gendry took a few seconds to find the right words that explained how he felt. Well, I've always wanted to be part of something. I tried joining the Brotherhood, but they sold me quick enough. I followed Sir Davos because I felt I owed him, but fighting alongside your brother was something more. As hard of a time as the other nobles give me when we were fighting that wilding army, I felt like we were all equal. We all had the same goals. Stop the wildings and protect the king. Look, I don't expect you to understand this, but for someone like me, common born, to feel like I'm the same as all the people who have last names that stretch back 1,000 years, to have those same people risk their lives to protect me, and for me to do the same for them, it's a big deal. It was the same feeling I had when left Dragonstone with Shireen. All the nobles that looked down on me before began to treat me like I was an equal. We all shared the same goal of protecting Shireen. Protecting my cousin. A smile formed on his face. You know, she actually called me that, her cousin. She gave me a hug and said I was the only family she had left. I never had a family before. I can barely remember my mother, and I never knew King Robert. Even though we don't share a last name, Shireen is my family, and I'll do what I need to do to keep her safe. Lord Umber should be here within the week. Roderick stated. Good. I plan to march south as soon as he returns. Robb replied. You're not going to wait for the forces you left with the Mandaelis to return. That's nearly 2,000 men you're leaving behind. The last letter I received was that Lord Mandaelis' cousin had led the army into Bolton lands and was about to lay siege to the Dread Fort. That siege could last half a year. I don't have time to wait for that to be resolved. Besides, it will be useful to have a strong force that closes to the wall. Mors Umber treated me with the respect due to a king, but I could tell he wanted to gut me like a fish. He's unhappy with the wildlings settling the new gift. Can you blame him, Your Grace? Wildlings stole his daughter. His anger is not unjustified, but it does cause some problems. Hopefully, the 2,000 additional men at the Dread Fort will put him at ease. Now, if there is nothing else, there's the matter of the feast in honor of your return, Roderick replied hesitantly. A feast? Wasn't the anniversary feast a fortnight ago? Yes, but many of the nobles stayed behind in hopes of greeting you and celebrating your arrival. They wish to pay homage to you. If they really wanted to pay homage to me, they should have joined me on the battlefield. Be that as it may, Her Grace already made preparations for the feast. Nothing extravagant, but it is expected that you honor the remaining nobles with your presence. Robb rubbed his temples to help elevate the headache that was growing. Fine, fine. Nobles. He sighed. I would have thought the lords and ladies of the north would be less concerned with courtesies than their counterparts in the south, but apparently not. Roderick gave a sly smile. Nobles tend to be the same no matter where you go. The ones in the north may wear less finery and be a bit tougher than those in the south, but they still covet power and praise. I suppose you are correct, Robb said as he looked at another report the Maester and left him. And what of Talisa? How did she handle her role as Queen of the North? How have the other nobles taken to having a foreigner as their queen? Rob asked with a hint of worry. Her Grace took to the role as if she was born to it. With your mother's help, things have been running smoothly. As far as the nobles are concerned, no one has voiced an open complaint. I wager a couple of them don't like the idea of her on the throne, but given what the Volanten have done for us, no one is willing to say much. Good. If there is nothing else, I would like to visit the Godswood. Of course, Your Grace, but I should warn you that the giants have taken up residence there. Rob felt strange as he entered the Godswood. It had been the last place he had visited before he marched south nearly 2 years ago. He had been a green boy then, now he was a man grown, a man who was responsible for hundreds of thousands. It was a burdensome feeling, and because of that, he enjoyed the solitude the Godswood provided him. He wasn't completely alone, 4 of his Unsullied still followed him, but it was close enough. The Unsullied didn't have loose lips like the rest of the men in his army. They could not be bribed, extorted, or tortured. They would take what they saw to their graves. His shoulder began to sag and the expression on his face changed, showing all the stress he was under. He knelt next to the pond and placed his hands in the water. He washed off all the dirt that had built up after a month on horseback. The king in the north graces us with his presence. A mocking voice called out from across the pond. The Unsullied turned to the source of the noise and readied their spears. Rob reached for his weapon but stopped himself when he saw who had spoken. I did not expect to see you here. Have you found Winterfell to your liking? He asked politely. In truth, Ygritte had been awestruck by the sheer size of Winterfell. It had amazed her that men could possibly build something so massive. She, however, was not going to tell him that. It's just a big prison to me. Why did you bring me to this place? I will remind you that the men of the Night's Watch wanted to hang you. So what? You want me to thank you for killing my friends and destroying our army? She shot back. I want you to appreciate that there were worse ways this could have gone down. Instead of being chained to a wall, you are free to roam around my castle as a guest. Free am I? Then how do you explain them? She pointed to a group of 4 men that had followed behind her. The men all knelt as they approached. Rise, Rob said to the men before turning back to Ygritte. They are to ensure you remain in the castle. And why do I need to remain in the castle? You let the other free folk settle the lands south of the wall, why keep me here? She asked angrily. Rob sighed. Leave us. And tell them no one else is to enter the Godswood until I leave. He told the guards that had come in with Ygritte. They quickly did as he instructed. Rob turned his attention back to Ygritte. I think we both know the answer to the question you're asking. But if you wish for me to say it, I will. My brother loves you. Rob noticed Ygritte flinch at the statement but continued. His feelings for you make you a liability to him. For thousands of years the Night's Watch has fought the will the free folk. A lot of men among their ranks were not happy with my decision to let the free folk pass the wall. They are even less happy with the fact that their new Lord Commander seems to care for your people so much. Jon's position at the Night's Watch is still fragile. Any of his rivals might try and use you to hurt him. That is why I thought it would be best to bring you here. There were thousands of wildlings that passed through the wall. I would have been safe from any of those crows. Mayhaps, but that would have left a similar problem among the free folk as well. The last thing I need is some clan chief thinking he can make demands of the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch because he has you in his custody. I spoke to Mance about it and he agreed that it was a wise decision. So I'm just supposed to stay here forever. She said with venom in her voice. Just until the war in the south has been resolved. And when will that be? Couldn't say. If the gods are just, it will be soon. You could at least let me go out and hunt in the woods. All that's in here are rabbits. It finally occurred to Rob that she had been living in the Godswood with the giants. It was my understanding that you had been offered a room in the castle. They serve 3 meals a day in the Great Hall. I don't want to live inside your stone walls. I want to be able to see the sky above me and feel the wind on my face. Let's see if you feel that way when winter comes. If that is your wish. But I still cannot let you leave the castle. Rob stood up and turned to leave. Enjoy the gods would. I loved your brother. She shouted. The words stopped Rob dead in his tracks. I heard it in your voice. You didn't think I loved him, but I did. He was mine and I was his, and he meant more to me than anyone else in man's army. Rob signed. I do not doubt your feelings for my brother, but they don't change anything. You two can never be together, you must realize that. Why? Because I'm a wildling and he's a crow. She hissed. No, Rob replied calmly. Because he is a man of honor. He's just like our father. Rob said with a smile. Look, I'm one of the last people who should tell anyone who they can love, but for the two of you to be together would require John to be something he's not. I'm sorry. Rob remained where he stood as he watched the words sink into grit. I knew he was never one of us. She said sadly. I told myself that he would change, that eventually, he would accept this new life, but deep down I knew he was still a crow. We can't control who we fall in love with, Rob replied. Had he had a wineskin on him, he would have offered it to her. He approached her slowly. If you would like, you could send him a letter. I know it would mean a great deal to him to know that you are okay. I can't write. You could have someone write the words for you. Why? What's the point of sending words on paper to someone you love if you can never see them again? I don't know, Rob replied honestly. Rob stood next to her in silence and waited for her to do something. To cry, to lash out, to yell at him. Finally, he spoke again. I know this isn't where you want to be. But there is still a place for you here. There are 200 free folk children in Winterfell. They will be my wards for several years to come, and someone should teach them about their culture. About who they are and where they come from. Is that a command? She asked with a neutral tone. It's a suggestion. I thought you might like the idea, but you are by no means obligated to do it. Fine, I'll do it. But I won't tell them any of those lies you Southerners spread about the free folk. They'll hear the truth from me. As you wish, Rob replied, getting ready to leave. Oh, there was another thing. I thought on it, and I will allow you to leave the castle to hunt, accompanied by guards of course, provided you do me a favor. Like what? She asked skeptically. If I remember correctly, you shot my horse out from under me during battle. I take it you're good with a bow. The grid gave Rob a cocky grin. I'd wager I'm better than any Southerner in this castle. Good, then you should be more than qualified for this task. My sister strong-armed me into letting her learn to fight. I have someone training her with a sword, but I would like her to be trained with the bow as well. Most of the archers are returning south with me, so I would like you to take up her training. Fine, but I won't be calling her princess. She replied defiantly. Rob chuckled. I think my sister will like you. After spending close to a fortnight going from one feast to another, Rob was sure he never wanted to have another feast in his life. This one had been nearly as bad as his uncle's wedding, because every single noble had to have his attention and let him know how devoted they were to the northern cause. If they really wanted to convince me of their devotion, they shouldn't have spent the last month waiting for me and eating all of my food. His stores were way too low this close to winter, and he feared it was going to be a long one. And what was worse than the lords that had to tell him of their devotion to the cause were the ones that felt the need to bring complaints to him during the feast. Court will be held tomorrow, my lord. I will hear your case then. Until then, please enjoy the feast. He had repeated that exact phrase with forced courtesy dozens of times over the night. Would you like to dance? Rob asked Talisa. She gave a light chuckle at that question. What, you haven't had your fill of dancing yet? Enough for 100 lifetimes. Not with my wife, Rob said with a smile. One dance and only one. I fear there are still quite a large number of young maidens who wish a dance with the king in the north. She teased. He dreaded the thought. Every single daughter had to be given a dance lest they tell their fathers the king in the north slighted their house. For the few minutes that his dance with Talisa lasted, he was at peace. He didn't think about the Lannisters, the Wildlings, or the White Walkers. All of those worries just melted away. It was short-lived, as he soon had to return to dancing with other nobles' daughters. Had he been less exhausted, he might have been more excited by the 3 sellsword captains that wished to swear their oaths of loyalty to him in front of all the nobles of the north. He graciously accepted them with practiced courtesy. The singing and drinking went long into the night. Many lords fell asleep at their seats or under the table. Blue Beetle had carried Arya to her bed and Lady Seaworth had done the same for the Princess Shireen. After hours of celebrating, the noise finally began to die down. The singer had stopped several hours ago, and the servants were nearly done cleaning up the tables. The only people still up, beside him and Talisa, were several members of his personal guard. After drinking, what Rob was sure was far too much ale, Patrick, Lucas, and Gendry had gotten it into their heads that they could take on Smalljan Umber. The three men might have succeeded in pinning Smalljan to the ground had Daisy not felt the need to even the odds. She came to the Smalljan's rescue swinging a half-eaten leg of lamb around. After Daisy threw Lucas across the table, Rob had ordered them to stop. He was grateful when he and Talisa were finally allowed to retire to their rooms. He walked with her, arm in arm down the long hallways of Winterfell. Even after spending 2 months here, it still amazes me how this castle can stay so warm. It is quite remarkable that my ancestor was able to use the hot springs below us to warm this castle. As they reached the end of the hall, Rob began turning left while Talisa tried turning to the right. "Where are you going?" he asked Talisa. "To our room," she replied in confusion. "But my room is this way," he said, pointed down the left hallway. "Rob, I've been sleeping here for the last 2 months. I know where the Lord's chambers are." Then it hit Rob. She was going to the Lord's chambers, his chambers now. The last time he had slept in Winterfell, his father had still been alive. He tried to hide the pain the realization brought to him. "You're right, my mistake," he said while smiling at his wife. It was a strange feeling being in his father's chambers. By rights, it belonged to him now, but he felt as if he was an intruder. "Is something bothering you, my love?" Talisa asked him, as she got into the bed. "No, I'm just tired," he replied as he removed his clothes. Rob got into the bed and began to kiss Talisa. "Gods, I've missed you. I can tell," she giggled. As he kissed her, his hands began to run down her body until they stopped at her stomach. Under her dress, it had been hard to tell, but now that his hands were on her bare skin, it was obvious that she was with child. "What, do you worry for the little prince or princess that is inside of me?" she teased. "I'm sure I will worry for this child for all my days to come," he said with a warm smile. "To think, in a few months I will be a father. Does the thought scare you?" "A little," he replied honestly. "You've fought in half a dozen battles, yet you're scared of being a father." She laughed. "Battles are less complicated. I know what we should name it if it's a boy," she stated confidently. "Oh, do you? Shouldn't the father have some say in the naming of his own?" "Eddard," she interrupted. The name silenced him but quickly brought a smile to his face. "Wouldn't you like to teach little Ned Stark how to ride a horse and swing a sword? What did I do that the gods saw fit to give me someone as perfect as you?" he said as he kissed her once more. Chapter 22, Revenge. "Should we try to wake Daisy up? She said she was going to teach me how to parry," Shireen asked Arya, as they walked through the courtyard. "I already tried waking her up. I doubt she'll be doing any training today, but if you want to try, be my guest," Arya replied in an annoyed tone. The comment did not deter Shireen's good mood. "That's all right. I bet Devan is awake. Maybe we can practice with him. You've been wanting to challenge him again ever since your mother forced you to attend court with Talisa." Arya withheld any reply. While it was true she had wanted to challenge Devan once more, after weeks without holding a sword she had little hope their next match would end any differently than the others. Shireen was unbothered by the silence. "Do you know when your brother plans on taking his army back south?" "As soon as Lord Umber returns to Winterfell." The two girls made it to the armory and put on their padding, Shireen using far more than Arya. When they arrived in the training yard, the two girls were surprised to find Devan sparring with a boy around Arya's age that they didn't recognize. He had brown hair and a face dotted with freckles. His clothes gave away his low birth. The two princesses watched in silence as they allowed the boys to finish their spar, if it could be called that. It was obvious to Arya that the boy had no prior training. Devan parried all his swings quite easily. In fact, he didn't even have his shield with him. She was taken out of her thoughts as Devan knocked the boy onto the ground and placed the edgeless blade on his throat. "Yield," Devan stated. "What?" the other boy replied, confused. "It means you give up." "Oh yeah, I give up." Devan decided not to explain it any further and simply extended his hand to help the other boy up. "Not bad," Arya stated. Devan turned and realized they were not alone. He quickly went to one knee. "Princesses." Out of the corner of his eye, Devan noticed the boy next to him did not know how to respond in the presence of a princess, let alone two, and quickly yanked him to his knee. Shireen giggled at her friend's strict sense of courtesy. "Rise, Kudsas. I already told you that you don't need to drop to your knee every time you see us," Arya said with more annoyance than sympathy. "It would be unacceptable for me not to, princess, especially in His Grace's own castle." "Well, at the very least there is no need when we are dressed in sparring gear," Shireen said, preventing Arya from arguing. "So who's he?" Arya asked. "This is Ollie. He's from a village up north. His Grace asked me to train him." "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Ollie," Shireen said in a warm tone. Ollie was silent for a few seconds as he stared at Shireen. It was clear to everyone that he was staring at her grayscale, but to her credit, the smile on her face never faded. Devan finally put an end to it by nudging him on the side. "Oh, thank you," Ollie replied. "Princess." Devan corrected. "Yes, thank you, princess. Is Lady Mormont planning to resume your training today, princess?" Devan asked respectfully. "Not much hope of her getting up before midday," Arya replied. "We were hoping we could practice with the two of you," Shireen added. "If you wish, princess." As Shireen expected, Devan had been able to overpower Arya. The weeks without training showed as Arya failed to land even one strike on him. As Shireen, she had been able to keep up with her training over the last fortnight. She was still no match for either Arya or Devan, but she held her own against Ollie. They practiced till midday and then retired for lunch. "That wasn't so bad," Shireen said as Arya helped her out of her padding. "Easy for you to say. You actually improved over the last fortnight. I've been attending court in that time. I was barely a challenge to Devan. He hardly got any hit on you. Because I'm a princess. He had more than his fair share of chances to do more serious damage." "Well, there's always next time," Shireen replied with a smile. The two princesses walked through the courtyard where they were shocked to find the king waiting for them. He was accompanied by several Unsullied and the red-headed wilderling woman. Arya found the image before her rather ironic. Had the woman been wearing finer clothes, it would have been much easier for some to believe that the woman was Rob's sister, opposed to believing that Arya was. "Your Grace, we had not expected you," Shireen said politely. "Yes, well, I thought I would inform the two of you about your further training." He handed both princesses a small bow. "This is Ygritte, she will be the one training you in archery." "A pleasure to meet you," Shireen said in a friendly manner. "I already know how to use a bow." Arya replied hostilely. "In fact, I'm probably better than you." The harsh reply only brought laughter from the young king. "Well, in my defense, there isn't much use for an archer in the vanguard." His friendly reply only succeeded in making Arya angrier. "So what's the point of further training then?" "Same as any other training, to improve. Besides, you're far from perfect." "Oh yeah? Give me a target and let's see if I can hit it," she challenged. "All right." He handed her an arrow, then pointed to a tree. "There's not a target over there." "Of course, there is. I want you to shoot one of the crows." As he said it, he threw a small rock at the tree and dozens of black crows began to disperse. Arya frantically pulled the string back and tried to lock on a target. She released the arrow and it flew through the air, wildly missing several possible targets. "I wasn't ready," she cried before Rob had a chance to say anything. The cocky smile on his face was the only thing he needed to say. "Ygritte, could you give a demonstration?" The wilderling woman quickly knocked an arrow. She let it go and it struck right in the middle of a crow's body. Before anyone had time to speak, she loaded and fired a second arrow that went right through a soaring crow's head. She knocked the third arrow and took her time to aim at a target that Arya was sure was out of range. The final arrow was released and a second later the third crow fell from the sky. It seems your skill with moving targets still needs some work, Rob said, trying his best to hide his satisfaction. It was obvious to Arya that her brother was correct, that she still had a lot to learn. However, actually admitting that was harder than she expected. She looked to be in noticeable pain as she began to apologize. Fortunate for her, she was spared the need to when she saw Ollie rush past the guards and make to strike Ygritte down with his practice sword. The strike would have made contact with the woman's face had the king not taken it on his forearm. Rob grit his teeth in pain as the Unsullied brought Ollie to the ground. She killed them. Ollie yelled as he struggled against Unsullied, who had pushed his head into the ground. My apologies, Your Grace. I lost track of him when I was removing my practice gear, Devan said as he came up running from the armory. The king signaled for the Unsullied to let Ollie go. He removed his weapon and then picked the boy up. It's fine. If you would, Devan, escort him to my chambers. Of course, Your Grace, Devan said before bowing and taking Ollie into the castle. Why did he attack Ygritte? Arya questioned. That is nothing for you to be concerned with. Just focus on your training. I received a raven this morning. Malachi arrived back from Essos and should be here within a fortnight. He says he is returning with a water dancer from Bravos. Arya's eyes lit up at the news. I'll expect you to be in a similar mood during dinner tonight. Arya's mood soon deflated. Rob entered his solar and said nothing to the two teenage boys waiting to hear his judgment. He sat in his chair and tried to think of the best way to begin the conversation. Your Grace, I accept responsibility for what transpired today. You tasked me with watching over him and I failed you in that task. Devan said with his head lowered in shame. She killed my parents. Ollie interrupted. Devan, you are dismissed, Rob replied. Your Grace. I wish to discuss this matter with Ollie alone. Devan looked as if he didn't think that idea wise but quickly realized it was not his place to say and excused himself. Please have a seat. I don't need a seat. Well, he's certainly bold. Outside his family, no one spoke to him in such a manner, no one who still had all their fingers or their head, that is. I won't apologize for what I did. She and the other wildlings killed my parents. They slaughtered everyone in my village. I won't rest until she's dead. If you're going to kill me for that, then so be it. Gods, no doubt the soldiers told him about Lord Karstark's execution. Couldn't they have told the boy about Talisa, or the Battle of the Whispering Woods, or that I turn into a direwolf when there's a full moon? They just had to tell him about Lord Karstark. I suppose I owe you an apology, Rob said, ignoring Ollie's tone. I had several things on my mind and forgot about your history with the Wildings. I wasn't aware that Ygritte killed my parents. Yes, Rob replied, ignoring the outburst once more. Believe me, Ollie, I understand the need for revenge. Then let me kill her. Let me have justice for my parents. I've offered the Wildings peace. All the crimes they've committed against us have been pardoned. Why? Why would you show those savages mercy when they gave none to my village? Because it was necessary. Because there is a greater threat than the wildlings on the other side of the wall. While that was all true, it was only part of the story. But he couldn't just tell this boy he couldn't have his revenge because the woman was his brother's lover. I would also remind you that the majority of the people that killed your village were killed when they attacked Castle Black. And 100-fold more died when we smashed their army on the other side of the wall. But not her. Not the wilderling woman who put an arrow through my father's back. No, not her. Rob sighed. Look, I'm not going to tell you this is fair, but this is what is required for the greater good. Right now the boy that ordered my father beheaded and beats my sister sits the Iron Throne, but I've offered him peace so long as he returns my sister to me and relinquishes his claim to the North and Riverlands. Peace would mean that hundreds of crimes go unpunished. Thousands would be robbed of their revenge, same as you, but in the end, it's what must happen, lest thousands more die. Ollie was silent as he took in Rob's words. I can't. I just can't forgive her for what she's done. I thought not, Rob said as he stood up. Ollie lowered his head as he prepared himself for Rob's sentence. He promised himself he would not relent, not even in the face of death. Rob placed his hand on Ollie's shoulder. You will be sent to Riverrun. It's where my mother grew up. It's not as large as Winterfell, but I dare say it might be more fun for a boy your age. Ollie looked at Rob with confusion. Surely you can't be punished for wanting justice for your family. All the same, I think it is best for the safety of Ygritte and you yourself that you be moved as far away as possible. You may never be able to forgive the wildlings for what they have done, but I hope you do find some joy for yourself at Riverrun, Rob said before ordering 2 guards of his to confine Ollie to his room. As Ollie left, Rob began to think of the other person his brother had asked him to take care of, or more accurately, Jon's friend had asked him to take care of. He still had trouble believing that man was, in fact, the son of Randil Tarly. I should check on her. Your Grace, a wildling party just arrived. The leader wishes to speak to you, Sir Roderick said, interrupting Rob's train of thought. Fine, send them here. Rob stood up and filled a couple cups with wine. When the wildlings arrived, Rob was relieved to find that they were led by Saigon. Out of all the chieftain he had met among the wildlings, Saigon was by far the most disciplined and the most accepting of his rule. The 17-year-old leader of the Thans entered into Rob's solar alone and took a knee. Rise, my lord, Rob said as he handed the man the cup. What is this? Wine. Don't tell me you've never tried the wine before. No, Saigon said as he looked at the red liquid. Try it, you may find it to your liking. Move out of the way. A woman yelled as she pushed past the Thans standing outside Rob's solar. The Unsullied quickly restrained her. Get off of me. I have a right to speak with the king. Let her pass, Rob said to his guards. He didn't know exactly who he expected the woman to be, but he knew it was a high-born lady. Alis. Rob said in shock. Stark, she said, not even trying to hide her disdain. You are one of the last people I had expected to see at Winterfell. Believe me, this was the last place I wanted to end up. We found her in the land you gave us. Owen told us to bring her here. Saigon said plainly. More like dragged. I told Owen I didn't want to be taken to Winterfell, but he did it anyways. And by these savages, no less. Something like this would never have been allowed by your father. If Saigon took offense to being called a savage, he gave no appearance of it. My lord, if you could give me the room. I'd like to speak with you later. Saigon immediately began to leave. Sir Roderick, make sure that he and his men are given a proper meal. Of course, your grace. Please have a seat, my lady, Rob said, signaling to the chair in front of his desk. He filled another cup with wine and offered it to her. I apologize for the manner you were brought here. The Thans have not yet learned all the courtesies that one is expected to give a woman of your station. Alis took the cup from the king but gave no thanks. So is this what is to be expected in your new kingdom? Where savages treat a noble woman like common folk and named lord for it? Or where loyal servants are executed for killing your enemies? Alis said as she looked Rob straight in the eye. Rob took all the insults as they came and made no attempt to interrupt her. It was no less than what he had expected from her. He had executed her father and, just or not, she had every right to hate him. May I ask why you left Carhold? My brother, Harold, was released from the Lannisters a month ago. When he came back he began making deals with the bastard of the Dread Fort. He told me I was to marry Ramsay Snow to seal their alliance. I knew what kind of man the bastard was. Of how he treated his last wife. So, I fled. I was trying to get to the wall in hopes that Lord Commander Mormont would see fit to send me to Bear Island. There, I knew I would be safe. But on the way, those savages caught me and took me to Owenry, who made them bring me here. She doesn't know how lucky she is. Gods only know what would have happened to her if anyone other than the Than would have found her. Well, you have my sympathies for all that has happened to you. I assure you you will be safe at Winterfell. I'll have the servants prepare a room for you. What will happen to my house? That completely depends on your brother. The Dread Fort is under siege as we speak. Eventually, it will fall and your brother will have no allies in the north left to turn to. If he surrenders the castle without a siege and swears his fealty to me, he can remain Lord of Carhold. He'll never swear fealty to you after what you did. I thought not, but he will still be given the choice. If Wendell Mandaly is forced to starve him out, he'll be sent to the wall. And what of me? If my brother is sent to the wall by the laws of gods and men, Karhold should pass to me. Normally it would, but as you might understand, your tone towards me has not warmed me to the notion of making you the head of one of the most powerful seats in the north. My tone. She spat. After everything my family has lost, you dare question my tone? The sacrifices your brothers made in this war does not justify what your father did or what your brother is doing now. I know what it's like to want revenge, but some things are more important than what we want. I wanted justice for my father's murder, but I have forsaken that wish in exchange for our independence. If the Lannisters forsake their claim to the North and Riverlands, I will give them peace. That task was made only more difficult by your father's actions. His actions were directly caused by your mother. She robbed him of his vengeance. What else was he to do? Do not use my mother's recklessness as an excuse for your father's treason. My mother has lost her freedom because of her actions. But your father gave me no choice. He not only disregarded my commands but also made me complicit in his crimes. Those prisoners he killed were under my protection. When he killed those boys, he killed my honor. Had one of Tywin Lannister's bannermen killed your brother while he was a prisoner, what would justice have demanded? If you think Tywin Lannister would have killed one of his own lords for my brother, then you're a fool. It's not about what he would have done. It's about what he should have done. If we forsake justice and honor in this war, then what makes us any different from the Lannisters? It was that simple question that Aelys Karstark had no reply for. She just stared silently at Robb with the same disdain she had the entire time. Robb soon calmed himself. Well, it makes no matter right now. Until Wendell Martell's forces are able to take Karhold, it's a moot point. I'm returning south to defend the southern part of my kingdom. Once the war is over, you will be able to make your case for your ladyship of Karhold. In the meantime, you will be a welcomed guest here at court. I'm sure the Queen would be honored to have your company. Your foreign whore. A flash of anger crossed Robb's eyes. He clenched his teeth tightly, to prevent an outburst. He merely stared at her for several seconds until he was able to bring his anger under control. I accepted your father's insults because of the men he brought to my cause. Now that the majority of his men have gone rogue or joined your brother, you no longer have such leverage. Because of the sacrifice made by your brothers, I will forget this slight, but if you speak of my wife like that again, I will not be as merciful. Now if there is nothing else, a servant will escort you to your chambers. Aelys stood up and walked out of the room without another word. Sir Roderick entered soon after she left. I assume that went about as well as expected. She has a sharp tongue. I suppose in her position that is only weapon remaining to her. You did kill her father after all. It's not as if she could be expected to speak on friendly terms with you. No, I supposed she couldn't, Robb said, as he laid his head back and closed his eyes. Find Horlis and send him here. Then once Saigon has finished his meal, send him here as well. Robb had nearly fallen asleep in his chair when Horlis Mollin knocked on the door. Robb stood up straight in his chair before he asked Horlis to enter. Your Grace, Horlis and Sir Roderick both said as they bowed in front of Robb's desk. Please have a seat. I instructed a serving girl to bring Saigon here once he was finished with his meal. Sir Roderick replied. Good, have a seat as well. I would like your thoughts on this plan. I have a task for you, Hal, and it's a rather difficult one. Horlis puffed out his chest. Fear not, Your Grace. Whatever the task is, I will see it completed. You are to take 250 men with you and head north with Saigon. You are to gather 10,000 warriors among the free folk, train them as best you can, and then sail to Cracklaw Point. Lay siege to every stronghold you think you can take. If King's Landing sends a force strong enough to destroy you, retreat to Harrenhal. As Robb expected, the request took both men off guard. Your Grace, I understand that you have pardoned the wild all the free folk, but can they really be trusted to fight for us? That is what I hope to find out. I will not lie to you. This is a dangerous task. There is the possibility that the free folk might turn on you. If you feel this task too dangerous, I will have Mance Rayder lead the assault instead. As Robb finished those words, an even greater fear began to form on Horlis' face, the fear of being thought of a coward. Robb had learned, quite quickly, many men would question an order that they thought reckless or even suicidal, but when given the choice to decline, they would rather follow through with the task than be thought of as a coward by their king. Your Grace, if I might speak honestly, Sir Roderick said in an uncharacteristically timid manner. Of course. You yourself proved that the wildlings are no match for a disciplined army. You destroyed their entire force with barely more than 1,000 men. If testing the wildlings' loyalty is really something that you wish, why not have them lay siege to Carhold? Harold can't have more than 300 men with him. The wildlings' superiority in numbers will make any counter-attack unlikely, and a siege would not require us to rely on the discipline of savages. They are to be referred to as free folk. Rob corrected in a polite manner. While your plan has merit and the unreliability of the free folk is apparent to me, using the free folk to lay siege to a northern lord, even a treasonous one, would have certain political consequences. Mors Umber is already furious enough with the free folk settling the new gift. Having them marching on Carhold would be the last straw for him. Plus I can't risk alienating the Great Yon and the other lords that border the new gift. Having the free folk fighting in the south will eliminate this problem. Nearly all the warriors will be manning the wall or fighting in the south. As long as the lords boarding the new gift treat them fairly, there should be no fighting or raiding between them. As you say, Your Grace. Fear not, Hal. I don't expect you to win any great battles. You are merely there to draw forces away from the main Lannister army. If you get any word of danger, retreat with all haste. Understood, Horlis replied. Succeed in this task and I'll be sure that you are justly rewarded. No reward is necessary, Your Grace. I will do my duty. Horlis said quickly. As the three men discussed the plan, Saigon entered his solar. Rob explained his plan to Saigon and the man gave no hint to whether he liked the plan or not. All he said was that the Thans would do as commanded. The four men shared a toast before departing. His name is Sam, Jilly replied nervously. So she named him after his father. Not very original, though I suppose Starks are no strangers to reusing names. And have you and Sam found your room here at Winterfell comfortable? Yes, thank you very much for letting me and little Sam stay here in your castle. It's much nicer than Castle Black, Your Grace. She said as she tried to remember the words Sam had told her to use when speaking to the king. I'm glad. I wanted to let you know that I will be leaving in a few days. I'll have my sister check on you while I'm gone, but if you need anything just ask a serving girl. Thank you, Your Grace. I was hoping you could. Your Grace, we spotted Lord Umber and his army half a mile out. A guard interrupted. If you will excuse me, Rob said before leaving. The welcoming party that awaited Lord Umber and the rest of Rob's army was much smaller than the one that had welcomed him a week ago. However, the vast majority of the nobles that remained would be heading back south to help Rob finish the Lannisters off for good. Rob had to admit to a small sense of nervousness at seeing the Great Yon. It wasn't that he was intimidated by the giant man, his days of being intimidated by other men had long ended, but the last thing he needed was to alienate one of his chief bannermen and the man that had been his greatest champion, well, at least since his ordeal with Grey Wind. The Great Yon rode in on his horse with a look of triumph on his face. A dozen lesser nobles rode behind him and they all dismounted from their horses and went to a knee before Rob. The stony shore is yours, Your Grace. Every single squid has been expelled from your kingdom. The Great Yon said in his booming voice. Rise, my lords, Rob commanded. The entire North owes you all a great deal for liberating its lands from the Ironborn. A feast has been prepared in your honor. All the nobles were escorted into the Great Hall while the men-at-arms were taken to Wintertown where tables had been set out for them, with food and of course plenty of ale. As the Lord Zet, Rob asked to speak with the Great Yon privately in his solar. He poured 2 cups of very expensive wine that had been gifted to him from one of the Volantis nobles as a late wedding present. For someone like the Great Yon, the quality of the wine probably didn't matter, but the gesture did not go unnoticed by Lord Umber. I'm truly in your debt for what you have accomplished, my lord. Was my pleasure, Your Grace. But I hear you had an even more impressive victory against the king beyond the wall. As I hear it, you smashed an army of 100,000 wildlings into pieces with only 1,000 men. I'm given too much credit. Might have been 100,000 wildlings, but less than a quarter of them were real fighters. That's still a victory worthy of a song. Most of my little campaign was merely hanging small bands of raiders. Largest party we found was around 100 strong. I thank you for your praise. Coming from you, it means a great deal," Rob said before drinking deeply from his cup. "I'll get to the point. I take it from your joyous tone that you have not been told about the agreement made between the wildlings." "Agreement? Was my understanding that you sent them all fleeing north with their tail between their legs?" the Great Yon yelled. "Not entirely. While we did bring the wildling army to heel, a peace was reached with the king beyond the wall. The wildlings have bent the knee and accepted my rule. In exchange, they were pardoned for all crimes committed against the North, and I have allowed them to settle the new gift as subjects of the North." Rob said the words in a manner far more confident than he actually felt. He prepared the icy mask that he wore on his face when dealing with difficult decisions. He was ready for the full brunt of the Great Yon's rage. He was instead met with booming laughter. "I guess those goat fuckers were wise enough to know when they've been beaten. Congratulations for finally bringing those savages into the fold," the Great Yon shouted as he raised his glass up to honor the king. Rob sat there in silence as he processed the Great Yon's reaction. He heard the words clear enough, but he just couldn't believe they were coming out of the Great Yon's mouth. "I must say your reaction is quite unexpected. You're taking this news better than any of the other lords did, and Last Hearth is the closest castle to the new gift. You've proven yourself to me 10 times over. Whatever decisions you make I will support to the very end. Even after all the raiding, all the burnt villages and stolen daughters, would you make peace with the wildlings and accept them as fellow northerners? If that be your wish, your grace. I'll even take one for a wife if it pleases you, but only the prettiest among them," he added with a sly grin. Rob was again moved to silence until a great laughter erupted from him. Rob filled both their glass again and raised his up. "To you, my lord. For no king before has been gifted with such a loyal bannerman." The Lord of Last Hearth and his king ended up finishing the entire bottle and several other bottles of lesser quality wine before finally joining the other lords. The mood of the feast went from rather formal to ecstatic when the king arrived slightly drunk. It became clear to everyone that planning the march south would be postponed till the morrow. As expected, it took the better part of the next day for Rob's hangover to pass. Still, the meeting was had and the preparations were made before sunset. The following day nearly 10,000 soldiers had formed up outside the gates of Winterfell to march back south. "Now promise me you will behave for Mother," Rob said to his sister. "Fine. But remember, you still owe me a suit of armor," Arya shot back. He laughed. "Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. It will be sent back to you as soon as I arrive at Riverrun. Just try not to wear it when Mother is watching." "All right," she pouted. Rob tried to say goodbye to Rickon, but his brother made no acknowledgement of him. His mother gave him a warm hug and told him that his father would be proud. Lastly, he shared a long drawn-out kiss with Talisa. "When you return, your son will be waiting for you. I look forward to it. I wish I could be here for his." "Your Grace," Elmar yelled as he came running up to Rob. "What is it?" Rob asked, trying his hardest to suppress his annoyance. "Scouts said they spotted a large party of Vale Knights coming this way." "What? How many?" "Almost 50. They are 5 miles out." "What are Knights of the Vale doing here?" Caitlin asked. Rob allowed a small spark of hope to grow inside of him. If they went through all the trouble of coming up north, it might mean some of the lords are open to the idea of joining us. "Should I tell Lord Umber to stop the march?" Elmar asked. Rob took a moment to think it over. "No. We are behind enough as it is. Joffrey's wedding to Margaery Tyrell has no doubt finished. We need to link up with our forces in the Riverlands as soon as possible. Tell Lord Umber that he has command of the army and is to march to Last Hearth and await me there. I will speak to the Vale representative myself and then catch up with him after." "As you say, Your Grace," Elmar said before bowing. "Are you sure it's wise to place the Great Yon in charge of your army?" Caitlin asked. "Wiser than it was to place Lord Bolton in charge of them," he replied. The entire army with the exception of the Royal Guard marched down the King's Road as Rob waited at Winterfell to meet the envoys from the Vale. Caitlin had ordered the courtyard cleared out of all but those who would be part of the welcoming party and the guards. The guards had spent the next hour polishing their armor, as to look presentable, and the servants prepared rooms for the lords and knights that would be staying. Caitlin had even been able to convince Arya to change into one of her finer dresses. Robb had contemplated changing into his formal attire but reasoned that the warrior king would be more likely to convince whichever Vale Lords that came, that they should join his cause. He did, however, decide to wear his crown. Robb found it rather funny that it was his side that was trying to impress the Vale Lords and not the other way around. Even if they refused to acknowledge his crown, he was still a Lord Paramount. Thought he knew now was not the time to allow pride to get in the way. "Who do you think they sent, my lady?" Theon asked. "I'm not sure. I was never very familiar with the politics of the Vale. But the Lords of the Vale had been circling my sister like vultures before she was killed. No doubt they wanted the protectorship of the Vale. It does not surprise me that one of them finally realized Robb's backing might help them with that goal." Caitlin replied, annoyed at the thought of the Vale Lords fighting over custody of her nephew. "You're Lord Robin's closest family. Shouldn't you be his regent by default?" "Maybe, if I had control of the Eyrie, but without a power base of my own in the Vale, my claim as Robin's guardian will be largely ignored." As the Vale Knights rode through the gates of Winterfell, the Unsullied made a path for them and raised their spears to honor them. 2 carriages followed the knights and stopped in front of Robb and his family. Robb took one last look at the welcoming party and began to remember the day his namesake had come through those gates all those years ago. It was a happy memory even if King Robert had been a monumental disappointment. His entire family had been there at the time. Bran had just finished climbing the battlements of Winterfell, Sansa had spent hours getting her hair ready for the prince, and his father had stood there solemn as always. It felt like an eternity ago. Robb was taken out of his thoughts as the door to the carriage opened. A thin man with an even thinner beard. Robb did not recognize the man or his sigil. His fine clothes signified wealth but also made clear that this was not a man that would be leading the Knights of the Vale into battle. Robb was about to greet the man when he saw his mother rush over to him. The slap to face caught everyone off guard. "How dare you show your face here? I trusted you." "Mother, who is this?" "Lord Petyr Baelish, your grace," he said before taking a deep bow. And soon Robb put the pieces together. His mother's reaction made sense. "You're the Lannisters' master of coin. What are you doing here?" Robb growled as he clenched his fists. "I bring a gift for the king in the north," he said with a sly smile that only served to infuriate Robb further. "If you think any gift you have could make me forgive you for what you did to my father, you are mistaken. The others will take me, Beth." Robb was quickly moved to silence as a woman was escorted out of a second carriage. Her hair was black and she was taller than he remembered, but it was unmistakable. "Sansa," Arya said out loud first. Chapter 23, Deal with the Devil. Caitlin abandoned all form of ladylike behavior and rushed over to her daughter. She wrapped her arms together as if letting go for a second meant she would disappear forever. Robb and Arya stood still in disbelief. "Sansa," Arya said as if she still couldn't believe who was standing in front of her. It was Sansa who took the initiative and broke apart from her mother to see her brothers and sister. Arya struggled to form words as her older sister approached. The last time they had spoken they had yelled at each other, and she had learned from the Hound that Joffrey had beaten her in front of the court because of Robb's victories on the battlefield. Would she resent the fact that Arya had been able to escape and she had not? The question was quickly answered as her sister embraced her in a hug. "I missed you so much," Sansa said as tears began to stream down her cheeks. "I missed you too," Arya cried. They held each other for nearly a minute before ending their embrace. Sansa wiped the tears from her eyes and turned to her brother. She stood only an inch or two below his eye level. "Your Grace," she said as she curtsied. It was that act of formality that shocked Robb into action. The aura of control that he constantly tried to maintain in public was shattered as he put his arms around his sister. "By the gods, you've gotten tall." As she hugged Robb, she spotted the youngest Stark child standing behind him. "Rickon!" she cried out as she broke away from Robb and went to embrace her youngest brother. "They told me you and Bran were dead. Is Bran alive too? Where is he?" "We can answer all the questions in time, but there are other things we need to discuss first." Robb turned to look at the man who had brought him his sister. To his annoyance, the man still had a smug look on his face. "You have returned my sister to me, For that you have my thanks. Now I suppose you expect a reward. What is it you want of me? Rob asked in a tone that hid any gratitude. For returning your sister to her family, nothing whatsoever. It was my pleasure to do so. But I do come here to offer my services to the king in the north. From what Rob had learned from this man, he would be a fool to take what he said at face value. But there was no way the Lannisters would have given up Sansa so that this man could gain his trust. The potential was just too great to refuse to hear him out. Please, join me in Winterfell, Rob said in a steely tone. Sir Roderick, see that his men are given food and that their horses are taken care of. Sansa spoke with her family for nearly an hour before they had accompanied Rob to the dining hall. She had been introduced to her new good sister, learned of what had befallen Bran and Rickon, and then told Rob and her mother about her time as a hostage of the Lannisters and of how Lord Baelish had saved her. She had spoken on Lord Baelish's behalf, but it was obvious to her that Rob did not trust the man. And that is what surprised her the most. While her sister had grown taller and her hair was cut shorter, she still seemed like the same person she remembered, if only a little kinder. Her mother again seemed the same, if only a little more protective and a few years older. Rob, on the other hand, seemed drastically different. While she was almost as tall as him now, he had grown a beard that made him seem nearly 10 years older. All the softness had melted from his face and his eyes seemed colder, almost like ice. But the most drastic surprise was the fact that he remained so suspicious of Lord Baelish. The Rob she remembered would have embraced even the lowliest of peasants who had brought a member of his family back to him. Here Rob seemed to think Lord Baelish would pull out a knife at any moment and try to kill him. Sansa figured being a king had changed him, and while it saddened her that her brother had been changed by war, she felt a small sense of reassurance. Their father had been a trusting man, and that, combined with her own foolishness, had cost him his life. As Rob and his family approached the table, Lord Baelish stood up. "Your Grace," he said while taking a bow. Rob ignored the over-exaggerated courtesy. "Sit." He ordered that bread and salt be brought out and given to Lord Baelish. "So you claim you wish to help me?" Rob asked. "All I claim is that we can help each other." Rob looked at the man skeptically. "You do realize how suspicious that sounds coming from you? My mother told me that she advised my father to trust you. Now he's dead and you remained in the Lannisters' favor, you were even made Lord of Harrenhal if what I have heard is correct," Rob said in an icy tone. To Lord Baelish's credit, and Rob eternal ire, the cocky grin remained on his face. An empty title in truth. "Your forces still control Harrenhal, Your Grace. Is that to be your excuse? That you were never allowed to profit from your misdeeds?" "No, merely a statement of fact." "So then what reason do I have to trust you after you abandoned my father to the Lannisters?" "I did only what I had to. When your father learned the truth about Joffrey's parentage, he came to me. I advised him to keep that information to himself. He refused and insisted on putting Stannis on the throne. Stannis had no love among the lords or the common folk. His decision would have made him an enemy of half the realm. And you sold him out to save your own neck. He asked me to secure the loyalty of the Gold Cloaks, and I led him to believe that goal was accomplished. So you admit you betrayed my father?" "I did what I had to in order to remain in my position. Your father's plan would have failed regardless of my actions." "And how did you come to that conclusion?" Rob asked angrily. "Your father told the Queen himself of what he planned to do." Lord Baelish let out a tired sigh. "I supposed he wished to give Cersei and her children a chance to escape Robert's wrath. An honorable decision, for I have no doubt Robert would have killed them all, but a foolish decision all the same." Rob remained silent as he decided on whether he believed the story or not. Giving the Queen the chance to escape with her children did seem like the honorable thing to do, and no doubt that is something his father would have done. But the story just seemed to fit too well for Baelish. Rob's contemplation was interrupted when Lord Baelish began to speak in a more sober tone. "And unfortunately, that wasn't the only warning the Queen had." "Speak plainly." "I told her." Sansa cried out. The entire Stark family turned to look at Sansa. "Father told me and Arya that he was sending us back to Winterfell. He said I was to marry someone else. I didn't know yet the kind of monster Joffrey was. I went to Cersei and begged her to convince father to let me stay. I didn't know the harm it would cause. Sansa forced herself to say as the guilt and pain made her want to cry. Caitlin came to comfort her daughter. We all make foolish decisions when in love. I'm sure you can relate, Your Grace. He added with a smug smile. And Sansa's actions alone could not have caused your father's death. No, in truth your father lost the moment he tried to put Stannis on the throne. He was unwilling to play the Game of Thrones. He wished to hold on to his honor and morals at the same time as he sought to overthrow the most powerful house in Westeros. Though I should mention that none of us on the council, the Queen included, thought your father would be killed. We all assumed he would be sent to the wall. None of us were aware of just how mad Joffrey truly was, Baelish replied casually. You don't seem to regret your part in my father's death. I held no love for your father nor your house. In fact, I've always had a certain disdain for those ancient houses who can trace their roots back to the Age of Heroes. Your uncle nearly killed me in a duel 20 years ago when I forgot my place. The help I provided your father and sister was due to the affection I hold for your mother. Baelish replied harshly, seeming to lose control for the first time. His face quickly returned to the confident expression Robb was used to. He allowed Robb to process what he said before he spoke again. While I could not save your father from his fate, if you look at my actions, I have done everything I could to help your cause. That's a lie. Arya shouted. All the attention was quickly brought to the other Stark daughter. I was at Harrenhal when he came to talk to Lord Tywine. He made plans with him to bring the Tyrells to Joffrey's side. Robb looked at Lord Baelish and expected to see fear or at the very least discomfort at the accusation, but instead, he saw amusement. I thought you looked familiar. I must say it is quite impressive that you managed to stay alive while a prisoner of the Lannisters. Had you revealed yourself to me, then I could have brought you to your family much earlier. Don't avoid the question. My sister says you were active in bringing the Tyrells to the Lannister cause. She speaks the truth, Baelish replied without the least bit of hesitation. You claim to have been helping me from the shadows, yet you were responsible for creating an alliance that threatens to destroy my kingdom. True, the Tyrell-Lannister alliance is an obstacle in your path, but the alternative would have been far worse. Had I done nothing, then King's Landing would have fallen to Stannis. He was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. True, but he was also a man of absolutes. You declared yourself king and thus made yourself his enemy. Whether it be petty pride or a genuine sense of liberating the North, that goal could never have been accomplished as long as Stannis lived. Robb could not argue the truth of what Lord Baelish said, that however did not make him feel any better about it. And just though his claim might have been, Stannis was not innocent in all of this. He took up a new god that demanded he burn those that opposed him, and if rumors are to be believed, he even used blood magic to have his brother K. Enough. I know what he was accused of. Robb shouted in a tone that startled everyone at the table, including Lord Baelish. I am not so naive to believe you have always had the best intention in mind for my cause. You have kept your options open, and now that you have taken all that you can from the Lannisters, you seek opportunities by aiding me in my time of need, but I will not ignore an opportunity to finally end this war and free my people. Tell me what you offer, and if it is useful to my cause, I will see that you are rewarded justly for it. A sly grin broke across Baelish's face. I offer you two things. First, I have the influence and resources to bring the Vale to your cause. Half a dozen factions have broken out in the Vale after your aunt's death. And thanks to your good father, a good portion of them wish to aid you in this war, but a strong few want to remain neutral. None of the lords, including the ones that are your greatest champions, will be willing to leave the Vale until a reagent is agreed upon for your cousin Robin. I can unite enough of the lords in supporting a regent who would be sympathetic to your cause. Robb's face betrayed nothing, but on the inside, his mind was racing. The thought of the Knights of the Vale coming to his aid was almost too good to be true. He wanted to stand up and start dancing with Talisa, but he restrained himself. Second, and possibly more important, I have some information that could be vital to your survival. And what is the nature of this information? Robb asked. First, I think we should discuss what I want in exchange for these gifts. And here it comes. Robb thought. If it is Harrenhal you want, I've already given to Theon Greyjoy in exchange for his loyal service, but the Riverlands has several other seats that have been left vacant due to the war. I could give you land and a strong holdfast to act as the new seat for your house. I had something else in mind. Something less materialistic in mind. Out with it. Rob replied, impatiently. I want the privilege of marrying your mother, Baelish stated in an uncharacteristically genuine tone. Rob nearly flipped the table over. He was almost sure that had the table not been separating the two of them he would have strangled the man. The fact that you have been given guest right is the only thing stopping me from laying a hand on you. I would sooner. Rob. Catelyn yelled loud enough to get her son's attention. She then turned to Lord Baelish. Petter, would you give me and my son some privacy while we discuss this? Of course, he replied with a smug tone. The rest of you should leave as well, Catelyn said to her daughters. But why? Aera complained. Because this is a discussion between your brother and I. Now don't make me ask again. Of course, Mother Sansa said as she took Arya by the hand and pulled her out of the room. I will not have you marry that man, Rob said in a manner that suggested the matter was not up for discussion. And who are you to tell me who I can marry? Robb Stark, you may be my king but I'm still your mother. Robb was taken aback by the reply. How can you actually be considering this? Because I want my children to be safe. She cried out. Because I want Sansa, Arya, and Rickon to be able to grow up without the threat of war looming over us. And even you, Robb Stark, as stubborn as you've become, I want you to be able to return to Winterfell to be with your wife and to raise your future children. Robb remained silent. Robb, do you feel like it is a slight against your father for me to marry again? I loved your father with all. Mother, of course, I don't doubt the love you had for father. Then what is it? You were not so resistant when you agreed to Arya's marriage. Why now do you fight this deal tooth and nail? The Knights of the Vale could make all the difference. I do not trust that man. Elmar was a boy of 10 when we agreed to the proposal. I had always intended to raise him here at Winterfell before he would marry Arya. He would have had time to become a man like Oliver. But Lord Baelish is a man grown and is not like to change who he is. Even if half of what he says is true, all of the actions he claimed to do for the benefit of our family also put him in a position to profit from our misfortune. He would have held the key to the north had Rickon not been returned to us. Him convincing you to send the Kingslayer away nearly cost us the war. We were lucky it was only the Karstarks that rebelled. And he even lied to you about the Lannisters having Arya. I'm aware of what he did. But is he wrong that Sansa could have been killed by Joffrey? You heard it from the Hound. That boy was mad. There's no telling what further indignity could he have inflicted upon her had she not been rescued. Do you trust him to fulfill his promises? I trust in the fact that he truly wishes to marry me. She replied stoically. Robb tightened his fists. And that's enough for you? It is. Robb watched in annoyance as Lord Baelish returned to the hall with his signature smirk. So do we have an agreement to the terms? Against my wishes, my mother has agreed to your demands. Though the marriage will only occur after the Vale Lords join our cause and the war is won. Of course, Baelish replied with a wide grin. Now what was the information you promised? Baelish ordered a servant to bring a chest into the hall. He opened the chest and began looking through it as he spoke. As I'm sure you're aware at this point, Lord Bolton has been working against you. Robb was not able to hide his surprise. He had only recently learned of it himself. His bastard son was the one who sacked Winterfell and made it seem as if the Ironborn had done it. He's been causing chaos in the neighboring lands that have only recently been handled. The bastard now resides in the Dread Fort under siege while his father has been recalled to answer for his son's crimes. Baelish had to hold back a laugh. It's not likely he will answer that summons. You don't fully seem to understand the situation. Lord Bolton is just as guilty of treachery as his bastard son. Mayhaps more. He has been conspiring to weaken your position from the beginning. Baelish said as he handed Robb a letter. My men raided the Tower of the Hand when they rescued Sansa. They took everything they could. You might find some of these documents enlightening. This letter is allegedly from Lord Tywine, offering him the position of Lord Paramount if he aids him in removing me from power, Robb said out loud, still unsure if he believed the authenticity of the letter. You seemed surprised. From your past actions, I would have assumed you already suspected him of betrayal. Why else would you have isolated him away from his army and sent him to go fight in the Reach? Rob was silent as he contemplated telling the man the truth. Lord Bolton was chosen because I wanted a calculated man. Someone who would not waste soldiers needlessly on his campaign further south. It was not until my brother was returned to me I was informed that it was Lord Bolton's bastard who attacked Winterfell. Baelish could not hold back his laugh this time. You truly are like your father, your grace. Here I was thinking you had uncovered his betrayal, but you're still as oblivious as your father. Rob stared at the man coldly. No disrespect to your father, but understanding the motives of others was something he was not capable of doing. I thought you were different, but now I know it was merely luck that prevented your demise. My demise? You think Lord Bolton would have lost the war for me? He was removed from his position after the ordeal with Duskendale. His men were divided among several armies. Even if he did join the Lannisters, it would not have made much difference in the grand scheme of things. Baelish's grin grew wider as he handed the king 2 more letters. You see, Roose Bolton was not the only one trying to betray you. Rob read the 2 letters carefully. He clutched the letters in his fists, unable to control his anger. This can't be true. It claims that Walder Free and Roose Bolton conspired to kill me and the forces loyal to me at my uncle's wedding. Under the protection of guest right. Caitlin asked in shock. To do something so unspeakable, I can't believe it. Even for someone like Walder Free. As horrible as it is, the fact remains the same. Roose Bolton and Walder Free planned to murder you at your uncle's funeral. I know I slighted Walder Free, but to think he would do something like this. And Roose Bolton, a fellow northerner, Rob trailed off. I understand your hesitation in believing your bannerman capable of such an act, but surely you must have seen signs, Baelish added as he handed Rob even more messages. Here he informs Lord Tywine of the forces he sent to Duskendale. In this one, Lord Tywine grants Riverrun to his second son, Imman Free. There is no denying what is clear. Lord Bolton tried sending loyal men to be slaughtered at Duskendale. And his men combined with Lord Free's men would slaughter your army while they feasted. Then what stopped them? Caitlin finally asked. If I were to guess, I would say it was His Grace's victory at Duskendale that ended this plan. You kept the majority of your forces together and even added a considerable amount of Volantin men to your cause. That added to the fact that His Grace sent Lord Bolton away meant Lord Free had little hope in succeeding in his plan. Rob and Caitlin looked at each other. That would explain why Oliver wasn't there. He would have let me know the truth of what the rest of his family planned. Rob said before turning back to Lord Baelish. It seems what information you had was as important as you said. Now back to the matter of the Vale Lords. How soon can you mobilize them to enter the war? Within a moon's turn after I arrive. But I need your mother to accompany me. Rob's hand smashed into the table. You will have your wedding after this war is won. Baelish remained calm. You mistake my meaning. I told you I could get the Lords of the Vale to agree on a regent. Lord Royce would sooner tear down Runestone than allow Lord Robin to be my ward. And some of the other lords would complain even if someone as honourable as Lord Royce took the regency. Your mother would be the obvious choice to be Robin's regent. She is his closest family member and is well respected by all the lords and ladies of the Vale. Fine, but you will travel under escort by my men. Rob, I just got Rickon and Sansa back. I will not leave them alone again. Mother, I need the Vale Lords. I can maneuver around the Lannister army until winter has come and gone, but Lord Tywine will burn what's left of the Riverlands to the ground if I do not stop him. Rob, you saw Rickon. He needs me. Mother, what Rickon needs is time. Nothing you do will make the process of recovery happen any faster. He will have Osha along with Sansa and Arya with him. I know after what happened while we were gone, that you fear the thought of losing them all again, but I promise you, I will not make the same mistakes from before. 500 men remain to guard this castle and it will never number less than that. But mother, we will never truly be safe until we defeat the Lannisters, and I can't do that until I have the support of the Vale. It took the better part of the day to convince his mother of what needed to be done. Every possible scenario had to be argued with her. She suggested people who could go in her stead. She tried arguing that she should take Sansa, Rickon, and Arya with her to the Vale, and she tried arguing that chaos would ensue without her at Winterfell. Rob countered all arguments and forced his mother to see what was clear. If she wanted to ensure her children's safety, she had to head to the Uri. Rob delayed his departure another 2 days to coordinate his plans with his family and to wait for Malachi to return. The delay annoyed Rob, with the latest news he had heard from the Blackfish, but he needed to ensure that Melisandre had managed to quell the rioting going on in Volantis. He had ensured Malachi that if further assistance was required he could take 2,000 of the Unsullied to restore order. But if he knew that was no longer a problem, he could move the Unsullied to the southern front. So, he waited. In truth, the delay did have some benefits. Stragglers from all corners of the north continued to rally at Winterfell. What was originally going to be him and his personal guard was now a sizable detachment. Rob's good father arrived at Winterfell with more pomp and grandeur than King Robert had 3 years ago. His retinue consisted of hundreds of people in fine clothes and jewelry. And at the front was Malachi atop a massive creature that resembled a mammoth. The beast was so large that it was unable to enter through the gates of Winterfell. Malachi had to be moved to a palanquin in order to enter past the gates. "Father, was it really necessary to bring all of this?" Talisa asked, mildly embarrassed at the gaudy display. "Of course, it was. I'm now a member of the Triarchy. I'm forbidden from setting foot on the ground during my term." Malachi bragged. "I take it that the mission was successful," Rob added with the plain bluntness of a Northman. "It was, Your Grace. The Lady Melisandre was able to convince the High Priest to calm the people under some conditions." Rob sighed, as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "We'll discuss those later. Please join us for supper. I would be honored to host you, good father." "Thank you, Your Grace." Rob spent the rest of the night greeting the nobility of Volantis that had accompanied his good father. He assumed most of them hoped to garner influence with their new ally. His kingdom's debt to Volantis would be paid once this war was over, and he had no doubt that those petty nobles would find a way to profit from it. Though there was a sizable number of other nobles who sought a different form of reward. 100 young nobles, second and third sons or even distant cousins to the ruling class in Volantis sought to find glory in Westeros. Instead of fighting among the other free cities or worse the Dothraki, they thought fighting the armies of Westeros might give them what they couldn't find in Essos. On some level, he respected the decision. One of the last people he met was the water dancer Malachi had brought over to train Arya. The man's dress was certainly impressive. He wore bright colors and numerous gold rings on his hands. Atop his head was a strange hat that had a massive blue feather in it. The man himself was less impressive. He looked to be a drunk and had a hard time standing straight when he addressed Rob. He thought of dismissing him, but Malachi had claimed the man was said to be one of the finest swordsmen in Braavos. He sent his mother away the following day, with an escort of 50 men under the command of Daisy Mormont. It was a difficult farewell, but while his mother had accepted the logic of his decision, he could tell she still resented him for separating her from her children. The hardest part was that Rickon still refused to show any sign of acknowledgement when his mother departed. Chapter 24, Return to the South. Rob's small contingent of around 500 men marched at a grueling pace to make up for the time lost. The 100 or so that were horsed soon left the infantrymen behind. Rob had ordered them to continue on until they reached Moat Cailin. "So how did Arya take the news that her betrothal has been voided?" Theon asked in his usual joyful tone. "I haven't told her yet." Theon began to laugh. "So what, she thinks you just left him there for the hell of it? You know she's going to assume you did it just to spite her." "Probably," Rob conceded. "But that's not really my greatest concern right now. You got a great many concerns it seems. Deal with Lady Dustin, take the twins, put Roose Bolton's head on a spike. Yeah, and it would help if you don't go telling every serving girl that catches your fancy, the list of people I need to hang. I'm not the one that fell in love with the first woman I slept with." Theon shot back. "You know I could find room for you next to Walder Free and Roose Bolton." Rob jested. "Might as well with this crazy plan of yours. Why is it that I have to go off with the expendable forces to the Westerlands?" Theon complained, half-heartedly. "It's not an expendable force. And if I remember correctly, you were complaining that your men wanted to raid the rich castles in the Westerlands. Well, here's your chance. And what is it you hope to accomplish with this plan? To lure Tywin out of the Riverlands. Yeah, see, that's the part I don't get. If that strategy didn't work the first time, why would it work this time? Because last time the army was half the size and I didn't have a navy. As I recall, that was your fault. Robb said in a mocking tone. Hey, I gave my father the proposal. How was I supposed to know that he thought it would be a good idea to attack the only other kingdom trying to seek independence? You Greyjoys aren't keen on looking at the consequences of your actions. Your father started a rebellion that got squashed. Then on the second attempt, he attacked a potential ally, and now this uncle of yours just attacked the Reach for no strategic gain. I don't understand what his plan is. That's the problem, Stark, you're thinking about it as a Northman. He doesn't care about strategic value and whatnot. He took those islands to prove that he could. So that the whole of Westeros and most importantly his fellow Ironborn know that he is to be taken seriously. And if I had to guess, once he takes those islands he'll gift them to the people who opposed his rule. You lost me. They'll assume these new lordships, and when the Tyrells finally retake the islands they'll be slaughtered while Euron retains all the glory. If even you can see that, then why in seven hells would they accept those lordships? My brief return to my home and my time leading other Ironborn on raids has taught me that we're not a very forward-thinking people. They have no concept of consequences. You know, when I first arrived in the Westerlands with my small group of codmen, they suggested we try and sack Lannisport. Lannisport. With 300 men. I nearly killed the man who suggested it. Bad ideas spread like diseases with them. And so your uncle is just going to sit back while the full force of the Reach descends on his men? Theon shrugged. He reached down and pulled a wineskin out of his saddle. He already got the glory and most likely everything of value on the island. He's solidified his rule. He's probably already on his way to Slavers Bay to offer an alliance and his cock to the Dragon Queen. Mayhaps she'll do us a favor and burn him alive when he arrives. I doubt she'll be as short-sighted as to murder a potential ally. Why do you say that? Malachi says she's crazy. Slaughtered all the men, women, and children of Astapa before burning the city to the ground with her dragons. Then she did the same to Liunkai. I would be skeptical of what Malachi says. I have come to accept the fact that dragons have returned, and it may be true that the Mad King's daughter sacked the city, but the Volanten nobles have an interest in demonizing the Dragon Queen. Whether she killed innocents or not is unclear, but what is certain is that she has been freeing thousands of slaves within Slavers Bay. The nobles of Volantis are worried that she might turn her sights on them. I see Malachi trying to plant seeds of fear against her. He might one day ask for my aid against her if she would ever threaten Volantis. And if she does, will you help? I will aid Volantis as they have done for me if she would attack them, but I will not help them bring the people she has freed back into bondage, and I have made that clear to my good father. If you say so. But I will remind you, Robb, that we already have a lot to deal with on this continent, and that's ignoring whether or not you believe Jon's stories. I do, Robb said, cutting Theon off. Have you ever known Jon to lie? Well, no, but I never thought you to be one to break a solemn vow, but here we are. I don't judge him for laying with that wilderling girl, in fact, I even respect him a little more for it, but we can't act like that doesn't influence his perspective. That's the problem with you Starks and your honor. Saving yourself for your wife means you both feel in love with the first woman you stuck your cock in. I would choose my next words very carefully if I were you, Robb said plainly. Theon gathered his thoughts before speaking. His judgment on the matter is heavily influenced for his love of that woman. I have no doubt they believe the others have returned, but we don't have any proof of this and we can't just take it on her word. I was as skeptical as you when Jon told me. But he isn't just taking their word on it. Jon says he saved Lord Commander Mormont from one of the undead. And when he was out past the wall he saw a White Walker take a baby boy that had been left out as a sacrifice. Robb, do you hear yourself? These sound like old Nan's tales. For a while, we believed the dragons had been extinguished from this world, yet now they fly across the skies in Slavers Bay. Why is it so hard to believe that the others have returned as well? Theon realized he was getting nowhere and tried another approach. Fine, say it's all true. Then what do we do? You can't be in two places at once. We can fight the Lannisters and the Dragon Queen, or we can fight the Lannisters and the dead, but we can't fight all three. We'll worry about each fight as it arrives. For now, we should focus on laying siege to Casterly Rock. Theon finally relented, if a bit reluctantly. Do try not to piss off any more of your bannermen while I'm gone. A thin smile formed on Rob's face. I think we both know that's not possible. Theon sighed. Yeah, I guess not. But if your bannermen have any sense, they'll be more careful with their complaints. They arrived at Barrowton in good time. The full strength of Lady Dustin seemed to be on display. Men-at-arms with the sigil of House Dustin surrounded Barrow. When they entered the castle, Rob was greeted with cold courtesy by its lady. She seemed quite reluctant to offer him bread and salt. I had not thought to have the honor of hosting the king in the north. It was my understanding that you would be back in the south fighting the Lannisters. I had hoped to be as well, my lady, but it seems like some issues in the north have not been settled. Have they not? I was told that the Ironborn have been completely expelled from the north. On that point you are correct. But it seems not all of my vassals have seen fit to accept my authority. I have the utmost confidence that you will be able to bring the Carstarks into submission. Rob stared at Lady Dustin coldly, waiting to see if she would take responsibility for her actions. When she remained silent, he was forced to respond. I will be frank with you, my lady. Your reluctance to send a larger force when I called my banners did not go unnoticed, nor did your absence at the harvest festival. I wanted to have sufficient forces to protect my lands. And it would seem history has proven my decision a wise one. Rob expected this kind of defense for her actions, and he was ready for a reply. So, the forces you held back were done to defend the north. It was. You may be too young to know caution, but time has taught me the importance of planning for the worst. And yet, Leopold Tallheart told me that he continually asked you for your assistance when he tried to organize a counter-offensive against the Ironborn, and he received no aid from you. The Great Jon told me the same when he drove the Ironborn back into the ocean. And thousands of small folk who fled the stony shore and sought shelter in Wintertown told my wife you sent them away. Leopold Tallheart is a fool. I did not trust him to lead my levies against the Ironborn. And doing so would have left Barrowton defenseless had the Ironborn turned their attention away from Torrens Square. And did you deem the Great Jon as not worthy to lead your levies as well? He had more than enough men to deal with what remained of the Ironborn. I would have thought that you would be congratulating me for defending my lands from the Ironborn and not rebuking me for what I didn't do. After all, many other lords failed in this task. Torrens Square, Deepwood Motte, even Winterfell were all taken over by the Ironborn. I will remind you that you were the one who failed in their duty to protect the north and not I. The boldness of the statement nearly caused Rob's icy stare to break. He had come here expecting to hear vague excuses for her absence and an empty apology. Instead, she had the audacity to accuse him of failing in his duties. However, if she believed these accusations would somehow force him to concede to her points, she was mistaken. I came to your castle with the intention of merely reprimanding you for your actions. After you added the majority of your strength to my army, you would have been free to remain here. But your insolence is something I'm no longer willing to tolerate in my bannermen. Half a year ago Lord Carstark got away with speaking to me like that because of how desperately I needed his forces, but now my strength has been solidified, reinforcements from Volantis have bolstered my position, and my enemies in the north are in retreat. I'm returning south to humble the Lannisters. While I'm in the south I can't risk having the northern lords squabbling for control. Any who have not proven their loyalty are going to be sent to Winterfell until I return. And with that Rob turned to leave. As he moved to leave, Lady Dustin approached him. He turned to face her and was caught off guard by the sudden slap. Rob's men moved to restrain Lady Dustin, but he waved them off. The Barrowton men on the other hand just stood there confused. He had no doubt that they were good loyal Northmen, but when your lord lays a hand on your king, deciding on what honor demands of you may not be so clear. How dare you? You question my loyalty after what your family has done to me. After what your family has cost me. Rob looked Lady Dustin directly in her eyes. He saw pure hatred as she looked back. Before this war had started he might have been intimidated by the look in her eyes. But he had seen too much during this war to care about the fact that someone hated him. For the respect my father had for your late husband I will forget this. but I would advise that you speak to my wife with all the respect due to your queen. If I learn that you slighted her when I return, I will strip you of all titles and property." Rob could see Lady Dustin contemplating her action. It was clear she wanted to slap him again, but his threat seemed to work. "Of course, Your Grace," she replied, as if the words themselves were poison. "So you got the old hag to hand over the castle?" Theon jested as Rob and the other great lords dined in the command tent. "Watch how you speak of her, Greyjoy, she is still a noblewoman of the North," Roger Riswell chastised. "As for women of the North there is no doubt, but as far as noble goes, who's to say how long that will last?" Theon said with a cocky grin. "How dare you?" Roger said as he stood up from his seat. "The spawn of the disgraced Balon Greyjoy speaks about my sister in such a manner. You're just lucky we didn't hang you with the rest of your kind when we retook the North, Greyjoy." Theon's smile faded. "That's Lord Greyjoy." "It is not Lord Greyjoy who has failed to prove his loyalty to his grace," Sir Benfred Tallheart interjected. "We lost good men when we fought to retake Torrens Square and again when we drove the Ironborn out of the Stony Shore. Tallheart, Umber, Stark, Sewin, and even Flint men fought with me at Stony Shore, but not a single man wearing the Dustin sigil was spotted. Sir Benfred speaks the truth. I marched through Barrowton and requested all the strength that she could spare in expelling the Ironborn from the coast. Even though I held a royal decree with His Grace's own seal on it, she refused to give me a single man for the attack." Lord Umber added. "You were given charge of nearly 2,000 men. What need did you have for reinforcements?" "That's not the point. If she only acknowledges His Grace's commands when he comes to her, hold fast and gives them to her directly, what use is she as a vassal? Better to remove her now and put someone more deserving of His Grace's trust." Lord Umber replied. "If I recalled correctly, you had some trouble taking orders from His Grace as well," Roger Riswell defended. Lord Umber smiled. "And I was forced to pay for my disobedience," showing off his missing fingers. "Do you suggest your sister should pay the same price to right her past wrongs?" Rob had been watching the ordeal in silence. He had intentionally stayed out of the argument as to not show favoritism towards Theon. He was relieved to see several other Northerners had done that for him. But now the argument had gone on too long. If he did not stop it now, old wounds might be brought up or new slights made. "That is enough," Rob said calmly. The words were spoken firmly but without anger. They carried an authority and finality to them that only a few men in Westeros possessed. "Whatever Lady Dustin's punishment will be, it will be decided after this war and after she is given a trial befitting a noblewoman of her station. Now I will hear no more of this. The Ironborn have finally been expelled from our lands and now only one true enemy remains. House Lannister killed your liege lord, my lord father. They have killed thousands of good Northerners, and have raped and pillaged the lands of our allies in the Riverlands. And now they want to put us back under their thumb. So, I ask you all, do you wish to fight among each other, or do you wish to finally free ourselves from the Iron Throne?" The Great Jon spoke first. "When we all declared you our king, I swore to follow you anywhere." "The king in the north," Theon said, raising his cup. Soon everyone followed suit and raised a toast to their king. "Are you sure it's a good idea to bring the Riswell men with you? If you're planning on taking the Lannisters' army head-on, you're going to need people you can depend on. Send his men with me into the Westerlands," Theon urged his friend. "If your forces came in contact with Lord Bolton, I'm not sure you could rely on the Riswell men." Roger's other sister was Lord Bolton's first wife. Allowing Roger to align with Lord Bolton, especially when his forces would make up 1/10 of your strength, is too great a risk. I'd rather have him with me where the forces loyal to me outnumber him 20 to 1. Mayhaps when you unite all of your forces, but until you reach Moat Cailin he's going to make up 1/3 of your army. He won't do anything without the support of someone like Roose Bolton. We've isolated his allies and put him in a position where his only option is to remain loyal. Lord Bolton's actions have taught me the importance of keeping those you distrust close by. As you say." Theon finally relented, even if he didn't fully agree. "So, are you sure you have enough strength to take the twins if you have to?" Rob smiled. "My uncle Brynden recalled nearly all the forces in the Riverlands to Riverrun and Harrenhal. The twins should have less than 800 archers, half of which are loyal to me. 400 archers could still take a lot of men down with them." A stronger show of force might make him think twice about putting up a fight. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. My good father brought another gift for me that I'm sure will make me appear quite intimidating. The smile on his friend's face gave him enough confidence to leave the matter at that. Well, I guess everything is decided then. Mayhaps we'll get lucky and the Castellan at Casterly Rock will just give the castle up when he sees our forces. Well, it never hurts to be optimistic, Rob replied. And tell Talisa's brother that I was sorry I did not have the chance to meet him. I look forward to it. I do hope her brother isn't as much of a bore as his father. I know we owe him a great deal, but seriously, all he ever does is talk about politics. Rob gave a light chuckle. I wouldn't worry. Talisa tells me he is a lot different than their father. In fact, she described him as a lot like you, only better looking. He jested. Oh, so you can still make jokes? Theon smiled. Who said that was a joke? Rob said, feigning confusion. Theon poured himself another cup. You know I'm not your wife, Stark. I don't have to pretend to like your jokes. Well, I suppose that is one of the benefits of being married, Rob admitted. You should think about it. After this war is over you should find a nice woman and make her a wife. Ha, are you mad? The whores would come begging. The two men laughed. At dawn, the army split in two. Theon and the Great Jon marched most of the army to Torrens Square to link up with the Volatan fleets and sail down to the Westerlands. Rob marched the rest of the men down to Moat Cailin. He left 1,000 men under the command of Robin Flint at the castle and marched the rest down south. Passing though Moat Cailin always gave him the sense of leaving the north, even though many good Northmen like the Flints of the Fingers and the Reeds of Greywater Watch, would be offended by the thought. It also occurred to him soon after that he was no longer leaving his kingdom, merely entering the southern part of it. He marched his small army down to the most southern part of the Bight, the area in which the North and Riverlands connected with the Vale. There he found the gift his good father had promised him, and again he was not disappointed. A band of about 300 Volatan soldiers had brought 25 war elephants with them. These Assozi beasts were nearly twice the size of the mammoths the giants rode up north. And he couldn't help but notice that they looked far more intimidating when a fat Volatan noble dressed in fine silks wasn't sitting atop one of them. He had arranged it so that he approached the twins during sunrise. A small part of him held on to the hope that Lord Free would simply open his gates and let his army come right into the castle. He was of course disappointed. Lothar Free of course came out to greet him, giving him all the respect that was due to a king. It was however clear that he was probing for Rob's intention. Rob had sent scouts on ahead, as was standard, to inform them he was coming. The official story was that he was heading to Riverrun to link up with his uncle's forces. However, being deceitful in a letter was one thing. Lying to a man's face was something Rob just couldn't pull off. He didn't know how, but Rob was sure Lothar knew something was off. If you don't mind me asking, where is the rest of the army? You went north with 8,000 men with the intention of bringing reinforcements, but you have less than half that number with you. I sent a large number of men into the Westerlands to lay siege to Casterly Rock. Now that I have a navy at my disposal, that task should be far more feasible. Now if you don't mind, I have matters to discuss with your father. Of course, we have tents set up outside to host your army. We weren't prepared for those massive creatures you brought, but I'm sure we can have something built to house them. While you have my gratitude, that will be unnecessary. The matters I need to discuss with your father can be handled quite quickly. I plan on getting my army to Old Stones by the end of the day. And it was those words that sealed Lothar's suspicions. He gulped nervously before he spoke. With respect, Your Grace, I would feel more comfortable if you entered the twins without your army. And why is that? Is House Free not loyal to House Stark and House Tully? Rob asked coldly. Your Grace, it is a simple insurance of our safety. My father would just feel more comfortable if another army did not outnumber his men in his own castle. Surely the marriage alliance between House Tully and House Free gives us the right to ask for such a request. Of course, you may request. I have considered it and denied the request. Now I ask again, will you allow your king to cross? I must consult with my father first. Lothar Free replied nervously. Of course. Rob said calmly. But regardless of his decision, I will be crossing this bridge. If, within an hour, those gates remain closed to me, I will know where House Free stands. Robb watched as Lothar Free rode off on his horse back to the twins. Why did you give him an hour? You're his king and he has no right to deny you passage. You should march on the twins now before they have time to prepare the castle. The small Jan said. You'll see shortly, was Robb's only reply. And sure enough he did. Half an hour later Robb's army spotted another army on the western side of the Green Fork. However, instead of laying siege to the other castle, the men on the western side opened the gates and let the army in. The Free banner was shortly pulled down and replaced by the Stark banner. As Robb had expected, the Freys had kept all of their forces in the eastern castle where the Lord's chambers were. While this did make a certain amount of sense, it also allowed the northern forces to have almost complete control of the castle. As forces from both sides began moving in on the southern castle, a rider came out with a peace banner. Robb was not surprised that it was Lothar Free who came to him with terms. Your Grace, I beg you to explain what is the need for these actions. We are allied to your mother's house by marriage. Lothar cried out. Enough of this mummus farce. I know about what you planned to do at my uncle's wedding. What in the seven hells are you talking about? Lothar shot back. Robb was angered by the lie more than he expected. He pulled out the letter Lord Baelish had given him and handed it to Lothar Free. Lothar Free took far longer than was necessary to read the letter before he finally spoke. This is obviously a forgery. My father is not the kind of man to make secret deals behind your back. It was clear, even to someone like Robb, that he was lying. Do not stand there and lie to my face. I know exactly what kind of man your father is. And I have no interest to hear your lies. Your father is a dead man, that has already been decided. What you choose to do will decide what happens to his sons and the rest of his house. Robb replied coldly. Lothar Free swallowed the lump in his throat. He looked at the small army the king had with him before he spoke. The words came out nervously before he finally spoke. I will remind you that the Lannister army has already moved into the Riverlands. You have not the time nor the men to take this castle. Robb thought about arguing but stopped himself. He knew there would be no point. House Free had gone too far to turn back now. They would gamble that they could hold out long enough for the Iron Throne to relieve them. So be it. You have sealed your house's fate, Robb said before he turned his horse and left. Chapter 25, Hand of the King. This was a disaster. There was no other way to describe it. Kevan Lannister thought to himself. Tywin had departed the city with the army less than a moon's turn ago, and in that time Cersei had managed to destabilize the entire city. In hindsight, it was obvious he should have removed Cersei from any position of power as soon as Tywin named him Hand. He had hoped allowing Cersei to remain part of the small council would have made her more amenable to her marriage with Loras Tyrell. Instead, Cersei had tried to use some religious fanatics to try and get rid of Margaery Tyrell. It would have been bad enough had she merely offended their greatest ally, but what was even worse was that Cersei had forced Kevan to deal with the religious fanatics, which the people were calling the Sparrows, with extreme prejudice. The Gold Cloaks were sent into the city to round up all the Sparrows they could. Hundreds of Sparrows and Gold Cloaks were killed in the fighting. He had been successful in quelling a rebellion in the city, but the Gold Cloaks had failed to capture the leader, this High Sparrow. Now they weren't even sure if he was still in the city. It was now up to Margaery to work overtime to keep the populace on Tommen's side. And on top of all of this, Kevan had no idea if his son Lancel, who had joined the Sparrows, was alive or not. As Kevan sat at Tywin's desk, in the Tower of the Hand, he was sure things couldn't get any worse. Unfortunately, the gods saw fit to prove him wrong. My lord, we received word from Cotter Pike at Eastwatch. He says the men who were sent to escort Tyrion to the Night's Watch lost him at sea. They told Cotter Pike he just disappeared during the night. Vylar, the Lannister captain of the guard, reported. Kevan began rubbing his temples in announce. Do you think they actually lost him, or do you think Tyrion just bribed them? Doubtful. Lum and Lester were loyal men. Besides, what would he bribe them with? He's been stripped of all his belongings and been disinherited. A promise from a Lannister, even a disinherited one, carries weight. Be that as it may, I find it more likely that Tyrion merely escaped from under their noses. He was a clever man after all, and his size could have made finding a place to hide quite easy. I suppose, Kevan said as he stood from his chair and looked out the window. His term as the acting hand show was off to a poor start. It was a mistake to send Tyrion to the wall, and he had known that. His brother was a great man, the greatest he had ever known, but when it came to his children he never looked at things objectively. He had so much faith in Jaime, even though the boy had the talent for little else than sword fighting. He had given Cersei far more influence than she had a right to, and he had shunned his youngest son even though he was by far the most qualified to rule after Tywin's death. Kevan understood why. Tyrion reminded Tywin of their father too much. The whoring, the drinking, and the weakness most of all. But still, Tywin should have known Tyrion could not have been responsible for Joffrey's death. It was clear there was another party involved. The Tower of the Hand sacked, dozens of fires set off across the city, and songs are gone. That itself should have been enough, but the fact that Tyrion had been the last person to touch Joffrey's cup before he died made Cersei's and Tywin's accusation seem absurd. Tyrion was too smart to place himself right before Joffrey when he was poisoned. Though he had never asked his brother, he had suspected that Tywin knew this and simply didn't care. The thought saddened him, but now was not the time for sentimentality. Tyrion's escape had dangerous political consequences. While he didn't have a reason to suspect, Robb Stark was the one that rescued Tyrion. If he could use Tyrion against them. He might even try to push his claim to Casterly Rock. They had enough trouble with Robb Stark with all the might of the South behind them. The last thing they needed was a civil war in the Westerlands. And after Tyrion's family had condemned him to the Night's Watch, there was little reason to believe he would be reluctant to help their enemies. He was taken out of his thoughts as the members of the small council began entering his chambers. Kevan got up from his desk and took his seat at the head of the table. Mace Tyrell's brother, Garth Tyrell, had been made Maester of Coin. Apparently, Garth was quite skilled with numbers, which were something the crown desperately needed right now with the mess its books were in. However, he did worry that they may have given too much influence over to the Tyrells. Next to Garth sat the new Master of Laws, Oberyn Martell. On Oberyn's right sat Kevan's good father Serhaeris Swyft. Serhaeris had been made Lord Commander of the Gold Cloaks. He was not a particularly competent leader, but he was loyal to House Lannister, and right now that was more important. On Kevan's left sat Grand Maester Pycelle, and next to Pycelle sat Varys. The seat for the Master of Ships remained empty as Paxter Redwyne had been sent to the Shield Islands to destroy the Greyjoy fleet. The meeting was not a particularly productive one. Most of the problems were an outgrowth of the war and thus could not truly be fixed until the war was finally won. Still, it was important that he remained informed. Oberyn Martell made some crude jokes. While we have sufficient funds to maintain operations in the city, I think the council should know that this month's revenue came in far less than expected, Garth said to the small council. That is no surprise. We had a royal wedding last month. When all the merchants and nobles left, they took their gold with them. Plus, there's a war going on. Certainly, trade will have slowed. Grand Maester Pycelle added. Not to mention the Northern Lords, River Lords, and even the Vale Lords have stopped sending tax to the crown for some time. And of course, there was that riot with the Sparrows a fortnight ago, Oberyn added, seemingly amused by the entire ordeal. I'm well aware of the effects war has on trade, Garth replied, offended at the comments. But none of those factors justify this drop in tax revenue. This month the crown collected less than a quarter of what it did last year. The war should not account for these types of losses. And it certainly can't account for the crown's expenses. I understand your concern on these matters, my lord. And I'm glad you are looking them over so thoroughly. But as it stands, matters concerning the war effort take priority. Once the North and Riverlands submit to the Iron Throne, we can levy new taxes on them and focus on bringing the crown's expenses under control. Garth Tyrell did not relent. I mean no disrespect, Lord Hand, but this is relevant to the war effort. It was my understanding that Lord Tywin planned on offering generous terms to the rebel lords to expedite their surrender. Even if we killed the young wolf tomorrow, the rebels have won too many battles to accept anything less than fair terms. And who knows how long this war could truly last. Our last report said the young wolf left Winterfell with reinforcements. If this war lasts another year, the Crown's debt just to the Iron Bank will surpass 5 million dragons. At that point, the Iron Bank might worry about their investment. If they began to call in the Crown's debts while we're still dealing with the young wolf, we would have a crisis on our hands. Well, what do you suggest, my lord? Kevan asked, only now understanding the seriousness of the problem. We can't raise taxes on the lords still loyal to the Crown. That would drive half of them to rob Stark's banner. Garth hesitated before he suggested his idea. I believe House Tyrell and House Lannister should buy up the majority of the Crown's debt to the Iron Bank. Once the war is done, we can worry about paying our houses back. I know my nephew would be willing to put up half, if he is given the same terms for repayment as House Lannister. Kevan had to restrain himself from rubbing his hand. He couldn't afford to show worry. I thank you for making me aware of the situation. Allow me the night to think on the matter. I will have an answer for you on the morrow. If there is nothing else, the council is dismissed. Kevan said as he watched all the members of the small council save for Lord Varys stand up to leave. When everyone had exited the room, Lord Varys finally spoke. My Lord Hand, I heard some rumors that I thought you might want to hear before the rest of the small council find out about them. What is it, Lord Varys? My little birds in the Vale tells me that the Lords of the Vale have been assembling their forces at the Eyrie. Couldn't that be a sign that Lord Baelish was successful in bringing the Vale back into the fold? The fact that we now have Riverrun under siege and have begun retaking the Riverlands might have swayed them to our cause. That might be the case if not for some other troubling news. Rumors have been traveling between a significant group of merchants that the Vale will join the Northern cause. But those rumors have been spread since Volantis joined his cause. Why would people begin taking them seriously now? Because I believe Baelish is the one spreading them. Kevan's eyes grew wide at the implication. I have several spies that work in Baelish's brothels. They say some of the more profitable girls have gone missing without a word, and very recently a new person took up management of the establishment. That doesn't necessarily mean Lord Baelish has sold off his assets in King's Landing, Kevan said, unsure if he was telling Lord Varys that or himself. Mayhaps if it was merely his brothels, but a look at several other establishments that I believed to be Lord Baelish's. Most of them seemed to have changed hands. A few of them were merely stripped of all their valuables and just left barren. Kevan's shoulders began to sag as he sunk down into his chair. The stress of his office begging to show. Is there anything we can do to stop this? He asked half-heartedly. My birds can give little whispers, but they don't have the power to influence any of the major players in the Vale. On that count, Baelish had been sufficiently outnumbered. House Lannister made him rich. We offered him the position of Lord Paramount of the Riverlands if he brought the Vale back into the fold. Why now would he side with the young wolf? He couldn't possibly expect Robb Stark to give him his own uncle's position. And we still have the larger army even with the Vale. Kevan said, slamming his fist onto the table. While I can't say for sure, it might be possible Baelish wanted a less materialistic prize. I don't understand. As you know, Lord Baelish was fostered at Riverrun. While he gained his friendship with Lysa Arryn there, it was her older sister Catelyn that he always coveted. With Eddard Stark dead, she might have agreed to take Baelish as a husband if he managed to bring the Vale Lords to her son's cause. Kevan was silent as he let the words sink in. It took him nearly half a minute to accept the gravity of what he had just been told. I have to send word to Tywin immediately. He needs to know that he may have an approaching army going in from the east. In the meantime, gather as much information from the Vale as possible. Find a way to get some spies into the Vale army. Of course, my Lord Hand, Varys said before bowing and then leaving the room. Chapter 26, The Final Toll. The Twins, second moon of the year 300 AC. All things considered, the storming of the Twins went about as well as it could have, short of the Freys laying down their arms and opening the gates to the castle. The Twins was one of the most formidable castles in Westeros, but it was not built to stand an attack from the bridge. The 400 or so archers that remained were unable to hold back his army attacking from multiple points on both the east and west side. The elephants had also proven themselves to be incredibly useful at taking the castle. The Volantin had brought ramps that were placed on the elephants' backs. These ramps were far more effective than regular ladders. He had also been fortunate that some of his loyal men had been in the eastern castle. When they learned he was taking the castle, they began causing mayhem from within. Once he himself had managed to make it onto the wall, his reputation had done the rest of the work for him. The phrase inspired no true loyalty, and a decent portion of them began to throw down their arms. As he and his personal guard made it into the great hall of the castle, he began to think about what his next move would be. His most recent reports had told him that Lord Tywine had split his host in two once again. One army was laying siege to Harrenhal and the other was laying siege to Riverrun. Robb knew that after what had happened to the Kingslayer, splitting his host in two was the last thing Tywine Lannister wanted to do. His uncle had, however, forced Lord Tywine's hand. He had placed 15,000 troops in Harrenhal, 5,000 troops in Riverrun, and another 5,000 in Seaguard to harass the other besieging armies. Tywine could not let an army of 15,000 soldiers remain unchallenged right next to King's Landing. Robb assumed he also didn't want to spend the next 6 months trying to starve the castle out. With 70,000 men, Robb imagined it might have been possible to take the castle by storm. However, had he attempted that, he would have given Robb the war. Storming a castle with that many defenders would have caused more casualties than the entirety of the war so far. So, he had done the logical thing and laid siege to both. Robb knew that Tywine would be hoping for him to engage his army. Both of Tywine Lannister's armies still held a numerical advantage to him. However, Lord Tywine was shortly going to receive word that there were other matters that need his attention. Robb was brought out of his thoughts as he approached the Great Hall. As he entered, Lord Free sat at the head of the table, unintimidated that his castle had just been taken. Robb approached, standing a few feet from the table. Though Lord Free was the one looking down at Robb, it was clear that Robb was the person in the room with all the authority. "So the King in the North graces me with his presence once more," Lord Free said sarcastically. "Before you continue, I would remind you that there is much you could still lose. Your fate has been decided, I'm sure you're aware of that, but I will not make hollow threats to you. I'm not Lord Tywine. My men are not going to rape your daughters and slaughter the infants in their mother's arms. But I have no problem with sending all your sons, grandsons, and great-grandson, bastards and grand-bastards to the wall. I could send every woman to the Silent Sisters and erase your family's name forever." Walder Free looked at Robb with hate-filled eyes. Normally the man would have made his snide comments until the very end, but the possibility of his house surviving this ordeal was too tempting. Finally, after a minute of silence, he spoke. "I will remind you that you broke your word first, Your Grace," he said in a mix of hatefulness and acceptances. "Do not try and compare our two betrayals as if they are the same. Your alliance was owed to my grandfather from the start, as your liege lord. Yet you still demanded a marriage of me. And then when I offered my uncle, your liege lord, to make up for the broken betrothal, you planned on killing my whole family under your roof, to break one of the gods' most sacred laws." Walder Free waited for the king to finish. "What is it you want from me?" he asked coldly. "Where are Oliver and Oliver?" "They were confined to House Irenfold's keep. Both of them refused to take part in the act. So despite everything you still managed to have a couple of honorable sons. You should be grateful. They will be the future of your house after this war." Walder refused to reply to the statement. "So who was it that came up with the plan? You or Lord Bolton?" "Neither. Lord Tywine was the one that presented the offer to me after news of your marriage reached King's Landing. Though Lord Bolton did make mention of minimizing mine and his losses when he marched half your army to face Tywine." Robb was blindsided by the statement. Well, I suppose with a comment like that I don't need to worry about his honesty. To admit even back then he was acting disloyally surprised him. He talked about making sure Lord Hornwood was slain during the battle. Said his bastard could take control of the neighboring lands. Because of that, I brought him Lord Tywine's offer after your marriage. Do you have any other information of note?" The conversation lasted for about an hour. Lord Free gave all he knew and then brought his son Lothar to reveal anything else that might be useful. They described how the massacre was to be carried out. He already knew Lord Bolton would be killed. The severity of his crime or how far it went back did not matter. However, he did learn of some of the other lords Lord Tywine had attempted to turn. He revealed that Lord Bracken had been offered Blackwood lands for switching sides. While he had not accepted, Lord Bracken had never made mention of it to Robb. The way Lothar described it, Lord Tywyn's messenger seemed certain Lord Bracken would be the first one to turn after the massacre. He might need to keep note of that. After the two Freys told him all they knew, Robb made his decision. All of the boys under the age of 14 will be allowed to remain here. As for the rest, they will be sent to the war. I lost 63 men and 1 elephant taking this castle. For that, you and 62 of your children will be executed. I'll start with the ones that seemed most involved in your betrayal. Black Walder, Hostine, Walder Rivers, Lothar. Me, your grace. But I was compliant. I gave you all the information I had. Yes, and for that many of your brothers have been spared. You can at least die knowing that some of your brothers will live because of your actions. Deciding who would be executed was actually more difficult than he had thought it would be. More than 62 Freys had attended the wedding. Usually, he decided that the Freys with family ties to the Vale or other powerful Riverland families would be spared and sent to the war. Lothar was the most notable exception. Being a Blackwood did not save him from his fate. Patrek had made a half-hearted objection on Lothar's behalf. Robb felt it was more out of loyalty to his house than to a belief that he deserved leniency. Regardless, he made no further complaint when Robb denied the request. In total, only 23 members of House Free were executed that day. The other 39 were spread out among the 3 armies in the Riverlands. He and his uncle Brynden had decided even before they knew of the Free betrayal to divide up the Free forces. He had been lucky that he had managed to get word to his uncle Brynden at Riverrun and Sir Willis Marndaly at Harrenhal before the 2 castles were put under siege. They were instructed to arrest all the Freys and their men-at-arms on a set day, which was about a week ago. Lord Mallister had already imprisoned all the Freys who were stationed at Seaguard. While he could no longer receive word from either of the other 2 castles because of the siege, he was confident the plan would go smoothly. Sir Willis had 13,000 loyal men to deal with about 1,000 free men, and his uncle Brynden had yet to fail him at anything. The Freys at Seaguard were the ones he would have been most worried about causing trouble, but Lord Mallister had said the matter had gone off without a single casualty. The Freys at Seaguard were brought over a few days later and properly executed. At one point he considered waiting to execute Lord Free after all the Freys had been gathered so he could witness what his betrayal had cost them. Robb quickly dismissed the thought as petty. Like the other Freys, Robb executed Lord Walder himself. Robb was surprised. Lord Walder stayed resolute until the day of his execution. When he was carried to the block, the 90-year-old revealed himself as a coward and begged for his life. It of course did him little good. While these executions did not weigh on him in the same manner as Lord Karstark, they were far more tiring. He had never been forced to execute so many people in a single day. Scouts say Lord Tywyn and Mace Tyrell command the siege at Riverrun with 30,000 men, the majority on foot. Lord Randall Tarley commands an equal-size host at Harrenhal, but most of their army is on foot. Lord Mallister reported to Robb as the lords had their war council. I suppose it was too much to ask to have him put Mace Tyrell in charge of an army. Robb jested, receiving a small laugh from the lords in attendance. We know that Sir Brynden sent a small party of about 300 free men led by Martin Rivers out of the castle before it was put under siege. The group had some success harrying the besieging army, but they've been pushed all the way back to Old Stones. He has yet to learn we have arrested the rest of his kin. I sent word to him to remain at Old Stones. I figured we would arrest him there when we marched south to free Riverrun. No, I plan to remain here for the time being. Lord Umber's host should have arrived in the Westerlands by now. Once Lord Tywyn receives word that Casterly Rock is under siege, he will be forced to abandon the siege at Riverrun. Once that happens, we can put all focus on the host at Harrenhal. Old Stone's third moon of the year 300 AC. It was rare to have news that was better than expected. Fighting a more powerful enemy usually led to consistently negative reports, which in turn made it dangerous to have an optimistic outlook. Regardless, this was the first time since the Battle of the Three Hills that the news he received wildly surpassed his expectations. He had camped his army in Old Stones until news of his army's invasion of the Westerlands had reached him, and more importantly Tywyn Lannister. After the success of his last campaign, he didn't expect a very strong resistance for Theon and the Great Yon. He expected most forces would hold up in their castles or simply try to avoid them as his army gathered supplies from the countryside on their march to Casterly Rock. Whether the threat of a siege was enough to turn Lord Tywyn's attention away from Riverrun had been up in the air. It had been possible that Lord Tywyn felt secure enough of Casterly Rock's defences that he might have felt he had adequate time to wait until Riverrun fell. It was obvious now that would not be the case. When the messenger told him that Theon and the Great Jon had successfully sacked Lannisport before setting up a siege on Casterly Rock, he had asked the man to repeat himself. It was not until Lord Mallister proposed a toast to Theon and the Great Jon that Robb had fully accepted the news he had just been told. Lannisport was one of the richest cities in Westeros and supposedly had the most well-trained city guard. The idea that it would fall to an army of barely over 10,000 never even occurred to him. Regardless of the surprise, it had the desired outcome. Lord Tywyn had instantly abandoned the siege at Riverrun and taken 20,000 men to end the siege on his own castle. The other 15,000 men were sent to bolster Lord Tarlis' army. That meant the army at Harrenhal numbered nearly 50,000 men. Significantly more than he was willing to take on. Riverrun 4th. Moon of 300 year after Aegon's conquest. Your Grace. Edmure Tully said respectfully to his nephew and king. The words were polite, but it was clear there was a hint of frustration layered beneath them. You did well, uncle, in withstanding Lord Tywyn's siege. Now that the North is once again free, we can aid our fellow countrymen in the liberation of their lands from the Lannisters and the Tyrells. Robb said loudly to the crowd of soldiers that had assembled before the gates of Riverrun. If we could sit down in private so that we might discuss our next course of action, Edmure asked. Of course. The door to Edmure's chambers had been closed for less than a second before he dropped all formalities. Robb, do you mind telling me why we have arrested all of my wife's family? Uncle Brynden gave no explanation other than he was following your orders. I'm the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands and a prince of your kingdom, I have a right to know. Well, at least he waited until we were in private to have this outburst. Robb thought, trying to look at the bright side of his uncle's attitude. You have my apologies, uncle, for the lack of information. I assure you Uncle Brynden was given no more information than you. I told him it wasn't his job to go about questioning the orders of kings. Brynden Tully added. But he does have a right to know, Uncle Robb replied. I suppose both of you do. Though he doubted his Uncle Brynden cared all that much for why he was told to arrest all the Freys. The three men took a seat at the table while a servant brought a small chest before Robb. Once the small room was finally empty, Robb continued. We had received information that Lord Frey, along with my own bannerman Roose Bolton, had switched sides. He had originally intended to kill us at your wedding and break guest right. That's absurd. Regardless of your opinion of. Let him finish. Brynden Tully yelled. Edmure relented, but his expression clearly displayed his dissatisfaction. My apologies for the interruption, Your Grace. That's quite all right. It's understandable in this situation. But you need to know Lord Frey already admitted to his crimes and has been executed. The information hit Edmure like a punch the gut. Did Roslyn did not know anything about the plot? Robb interrupted. Edmure was noticeably relieved to hear that. I shouldn't have needed to ask. Roslyn is a kind-hearted woman. I should never have entertained the thought. If I might ask, Your Grace, who informed you of Lord Walder and Lord Bolton's betrayal? I didn't believe you had any spies among the Lannisters. Robb's mood quickly soured. It was not a spy of mine that brought this information to me. In fact, both of you know the man. Petyr Baelish. So Petyr is on our side after all. I always knew he was a noble man. Edmure exclaimed joyfully. Robb scoffed. While I believe he is on our side, he did not join us out of any sense of honor. He wanted something in return for his loyalty. Robb said angrily. He wanted to marry Cat. Brynden chuckled. You find this funny, do you, uncle? Robb said, surprised not only at his uncle's response but at the idea of snapping at his closest advisor. While I understand why this might upset you, Your Grace. Petyr had little reason to be loyal to House Tully and even less reason to be loyal to House Stark after his duel with Brandon. He grew up loving a woman who he could never be with because of his station. When he saw his opportunity to leverage his information, he went for it. You more than most people should know what a man is willing to do when in love. Rob didn't much like the comparison. How did Kat take it? She loved your father dearly. I knew she planned to never remarry. Edmure asked. It was I who had a greater problem with it than her. I tried to talk her out of it, but Baelish said he could rally the Knights of the Vale to our cause. After that, my complaints seemed trivial, and in truth, I don't know if it felt right telling my own mother who she could marry. If Petter can make good on his promise, then this war might have just been tipped in our favor. The Lannisters and Tyrells have taken massive losses already, and the South is in massive debt. If Tywin wants to keep his grandson on the throne, he might be willing to listen to our terms. I suppose we'll know once they join us on the field. Let's have a toast. We finally have good news. Edmure added. Not yet, uncle. We still need to pass judgment on the phrase you have in the castle. I lost 63 men taking the twins, and I told Lord Walder before he died that 63 of his sons would die because of that. The rest will be sent to the wall. Rob, these are members of Roslyn's family. Surely you can give them leniency. After all, they never, in fact, broke guest right. Edmure pleaded. Only because Lord Bolton was not there. Rob snapped. Roslyn's full siblings will be pardoned because of their refusal to go through with their father's wishes, but the rest will face punishment for what they intended to do. Edmure seemed somewhat relieved that his good brothers would be spared. How many of the Free do you have imprisoned, uncle? Rob asked Brynden. Less than you might think. Merritt, Innes, Roriger, Jimmy, and maybe 2 or 3 others, I can't remember the names for, were the only ones that remained in the castle. Like we planned, I sent a good portion of the Free forces out in raiding parties before the siege got set up so as to have the fewest number of Free soldiers in the castle. The plan worked better than I hoped. In fact, the forces led by Martin Rivers were able to deal heavy losses on the Tyrell rearguard before they were forced to retreat. The distraction gave us a chance to send out a sortie. All told, I think we killed 7, mayhaps 800 Lannister troops. While I understand the need for punishment, Martin might be someone you consider showing mercy for. Brynden answered. I'll consider it. So I suppose the rest of them haven't returned. Actually, Hosteen returned with his small party last night. The guards arrested them as ordered. Edmure replied. The others have most likely heard the news that their family has been arrested. I imagine all the others have sought protection with the sieging forces at Harrenhal. Brynden added. And Black Walder. He was among the forces under Willis Mandaelis' command. If he did his job correctly, he should be in a cell. Once we lift the siege there, you can put his head on a spike. Brynden replied, knowing full well what his king was thinking. It was clear that Rob had not forgotten Black Walder's comments about Talisa. Fine, I'll take care of the phrase on the morrow. For now, I just want to rest. I've been marching for the past 2 moons. Your Grace, would you wish to have dinner with Roslyn and I tonight? Indure asked. I doubt she would enjoy breaking bread with me after finding out that I executed her father, Rob replied dryly. She might not. But I think she will understand you did what you had to after she learns what her father was planning. And more than anything, I think she will just be relieved that her full brothers will be spared the same fate. So like I said, it a shorter chapter. Just trying to get back into the story after such a long break. If there are a lot of mistakes, let me know. I might have to look over this chapter again. Kind of got it out in a hurry. Lastly, if anyone would be willing to a beta reader, let me know. I've needed one for a while but just never gotten around to finding someone to do it. Chapter 27, The Expendable Force. 9 fours. Bullshit. Theon yelled. I'll wager the rest of the fingers on my right hand that you don't have 9 fours, Eldred Cod replied drunkenly. Well, I don't know about fingers, but here. Theon said as he took of the 3 gold rings, one of the many gifts Lord Farmer had given him for not sacking the castle. Come on, his wagering fingers. You're going to have to try harder. Theon rolled his eyes. Fine, he said before pulling out a small ruby. I'm out. Benfred Tallheart replied. Now what are you matching the bet with? Theon challenged. Markello smiled and grabbed the dagger on his side. He showed it to Eldred and Theon and then pulled part of the blade out of its scabbard so that they could see the metal. Valyrian steel, dragon bone hilt, inlaid gold. Fine, I'm calling you a liar. Eldred Cod yelled as the four men picked up their cups. It quickly became deathly quiet. Markello pulled out his knife from the scabbard. Now are you going to take it like a man or do we have to hold you down? Eldred Cod downed his cup of ale then placed his hand on the table. Just get it over with you little shit. Markello raised his knife above Eldred Cod's hand and swung it down into the table. Eldred closed his eyes and braced for the pain. When it didn't come he finally opened his eyes. He saw that the blade was an inch from his fingers. But I'm a reasonable man, let's say 20 dragons. 5 for each finger. Eldred Cod pulled out all that he had in his pockets. The amounts came out to 15 dragons and a dozen other silver coins. You're short. That would be a pretty stupid reason to lose a finger.